Chapter 1396. Mr. Chin, let me tell you a piece of good news. Our daily sales have exceeded 100,000 cans. Denver couldn't help but say to Chin Xiu. Ah. With their help, the topic of doing various things while drinking Dashin beer became more and more popular. As a result, their sales increased day by day. Not bad. Did you come up with this topic? Chin Xian asked. Chin Xiu? The virtuous locust carries the squid. Mr. Chin, isn't this the topic you found people to start? It's not me. I didn't do anything. I think you're capable. So I said I won't interfere with the management. Denver was dazed. Was this topic a natural one? Shiyuan Beer, America's headquarters. Looking at the sales report, Weston Leese's face darkened. He wasn't angry because of his beer sales, but because an eye-catching beer brand had entered his sight. Dashin Beer. This was a brand new beer brand. But in the 10 days since it was released, the sales kept increasing. From 10,000 cans on the first day, it had exceeded 100,000 cans now. Of course, there was still a huge gap between this and Shiyuan Beer's sales. Shiyuan Beer's daily sales in America were maintained at more than 5 million cans. California was a very important region, with sales of more than 500,000 cans per day. It was either first or second in sales every day. The maternity leave brands that could compete with Shiyuan Beer were basically the top international brands. Dashin Beer's daily sales were still increasing, but there was still a huge gap between it and Shiyuan Beer. Dashin Beer was far from qualified to compete with Shiyuan Beer. But Weston Leese just couldn't stand Dashin Beer and the CEO of Dashin Beer, because Denver used to be his boss and Weston Reese relied on him to pick a side and then kicked out Denver, who did not pick a side. Then he replaced Denver and became the head of Shiyuan Beer's North American region. But now this guy who was like a stray dog in his eyes had actually gotten up and appeared in front of him again. Even if Dashin Beer had never targeted Shiyuan Beer, it didn't have the right to do so. But Weston Leese still believed that Denver was here for revenge. Big Mountain Beer and Denver hadn't made a move yet, but Weston Reese had already viewed them as imaginary enemies. For a small brewery, selling 100,000 cans of beer a day was a pretty good result. Even Chin, the imperial title of Fu Ci, models, Liaozhou Qinhuai Jian Dumpling. Tired? What? Waiter V? Change the ribbon? Ju Qnat that time. Even if he had to take a loan, the bank would be more than happy to lend him money. No, I have to curb the development of Dashin Beer. He could not give Denver a chance to stand in front of him again and have a fair talk with him. Weston Leese suddenly thought of an idea. Mr. Denver, something has happened. The trend on the internet has suddenly changed. The assistant hurriedly pushed open the door of Denver's office. What happened? Now, Denver was very concerned about the topic on the internet. Hearing the assistant's words, he immediately turned on his phone. It's like this. Someone posted on Facebook that he was drinking while driving and then got into a car accident. Now, someone is purposely changing the topic and attacking our company's irresponsible promotion, causing social unrest. Denver raised his eyebrows. Dashin Beer had suddenly appeared out of nowhere and reached 100,000 daily sales in a short 10 days. It was obviously affecting the interests of other brands. Also, Denver had a vague feeling that this was not just a dispute over business interests. After all, Dashin Beer had only been around for a short time. Although the sales were gratifying, the 100,000 daily sales were distributed among dozens of beer brands. The impact on everyone was very limited. Small and medium-sized manufacturers would not waste time, energy, and money to attack Dashin Beer because they did not have the capital. Their profits were not high to begin with. Why would they spend hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars to attack Dashin Beer? No one had anything better to do. There was only one possibility. It was the big beer manufacturers. Only they had the ability to do so. When the big manufacturers discovered a potential threat, they would indeed take the initiative to attack the potential threat. However, with Dash and Beer's current sales, it was not at the level of the so-called potential threat. Denver used to be the general manager of Shiyuan Beer in North America. He had done the same thing before. Therefore, after analyzing it, he realized that it was not about market competition. It was about revenge. The target was probably Shiyuan Beer. Denver sneered. It was Wes Stanley's. That kid was still so unmotivated. Denver did not have a good impression of Shiyuan Beer. After all, he was kicked out by Shiyuan Beer. He was even more disdainful of Wes Stanley's. The conflict with Shiyuan Beer came too early. It was so early that even Denver was surprised. However, this did not mean that Denver was afraid. Small companies were afraid of big companies mainly because they did not have equal rights to speak. It was already not bad for small companies to have 1 or 2 million annual advertising expenses. Some small companies did not even have any advertising expenses. Dash and Beer's predecessor was such a small brewery. Its annual sales were not more than 10 million. But now Dash and Beer was different. Because of Chin, Burden, talking about Wushuang Man, Style Luo Tuo Ibai, Disease, Ma Shou Ibai, Male Servant Degree, Min Tong. Of course, the plan was to invest the money into advertising in the next 6 months. However, Denver changed his mind. He wanted to use this opportunity to cause trouble. Call the manager of the publicity department here, Denver said. Also, when the daily sales report from Mara Supermarket comes out, bring it to me immediately. Denver was a shrewd businessman and a good manager. After making the decision, he quickly conveyed his order. Then he received the daily sales report from Mara Supermarket. Due to the influence of the internet, Dash and Beer's sales had dropped by 100,000 cans yesterday. This was the first time Dash and Beer's sales had gone against the trend. Denver had to change the situation as soon as possible. Otherwise, the sales would plummet. Under Denver's urging, the publicity department quickly came up with a few plans. One of the plans made Denver hesitate. Chapter 1397. This plan was to use Shiyuan Beer as a comparison. The first example given by the publicity planner was, last night a party was held at home. When they were having fun, the Dash and Beer was finished. At the party, the neighbors brought the beer stored at home over. In the end, no one could drink it. When did the taste of Shiyuan Beer become so bad? This kind of publicity was actually a kind of soft advertising. It was very common. But generally speaking, if a company used this kind of soft advertising, it should not use the names of other companies, especially if it was to belittle other companies to highlight their own company. If they used the names of other companies, they might be sued for unfair business competition. This was not unprecedented. For example, when Pepsi and Coca-Cola were competing, Pepsi had an advertisement. A boy came to the vending machine and pressed 2 cans of Coca-Cola. Then he stepped on the 2 cans of Coca-Cola to press the Pepsi button on the top. In the end, the boy took away the Pepsi and ignored the 2 cans of Coca-Cola on the ground. Because of this advertisement, Pepsi was sued, and the advertisement was taken down. They were also fined. Of course, Pepsi knew that this advertisement was against the law, but they still did it. It was because they wanted to take advantage of Coca-Cola, which was at its peak at that time. Although this led to a series of advertising wars, PepsiCo still made a profit from this. Because other than compensating a few $1 million, Pepsi did not do any real harm. A few $1 million was not even as much as the cost of an advertisement. But Pepsi used this to gain more attention. Of course, that kind of open war was too unskillful. Denver would not do such a thing. He planned to use the Internet Water Army to advertise. The advantage of using the Internet Water Army was that even if Shiyuan Beer was unhappy, it could not do anything to Dash and Beer. Shiyuan Beer could not sue the Water Army, right? Dash and Beer could say that it was the consumer's personal behavior. Also, the difference between Shiyuan Beer and Dash and Beer was too big. No matter how Shiyuan Beer fought back, it was still advertising for Dash and Beer. All in all, this kind of behavior was very hooligan. At night, in a university student's apartment, Kuluafu was still revising his homework. Suddenly, Aparl called, "Kuluafu, help me buy a few cases of beer." Kuluafu's face darkened. "The beer at the party is finished?" "Yes, these bastards can drink too much," Aparl said. "Aren't you having a party at Captain's apartment? That place should be closer to the convenience store than here, right? You don't know this. Originally, I prepared 5 boxes of Dashen beer. In the end, I saw that the beer was almost finished, so I went to the convenience store to buy 5 boxes of Shiyuan beer. In the end, everyone felt that Shiyuan beer tasted bad. I have no choice. If I can't get Dashen beer, this party will end on a bad note. Then let's go to the convenience store again." The convenience store doesn't have Dashen beer. Only Mara Supermarket does. In the entire city, only Beitan Mara Supermarket is open 24 hours a day. What? You want me to go to Beitan Mara Supermarket? It's at least 30 kilometers away from the school. Kuluafu, you like Dashen beer too, right? Can you reserve a few boxes of beer for our dormitory? It's my treat. Apar's words were exactly what Kuluafu wanted. Although Kuluafu liked Dashen beer, the price of Dashen beer was a lot more expensive than ordinary beer. Drinking it occasionally wasn't bad, but if he were to drink it every day, Kuluafu couldn't afford it. The beer supply in the dormitory was basically handled by his rich second-generation roommate, Appa. To be honest, Kuluafu was now completely obsessed with Dashen beer. Every time he reviewed his lessons, he would drink a few cans of beer. Every time he reviewed his lessons while drinking, it was very efficient. However, it wasn't completely flawless. If he drank 10 cans of beer in one go, he would get drunk. Therefore, if he had classes in the afternoon, he definitely couldn't drink it in the afternoon. The best time to drink it was after dinner. Moreover, there was another advantage to drinking Dashen beer while reviewing his lessons. That was, it wouldn't cause a hangover, and he wouldn't feel dizzy the next day. This was also the reason why Kuluafu was obsessed with Dashen beer. Of course, Dashen beer had another disadvantage. It couldn't be mixed with other beers at the same time. If other beers were drunk alone, there would be no problem. However, if he were to drink other beers after drinking Dashen beer, he would immediately feel that the other beers tasted bad. It wasn't because Dashen beer affected his taste buds, but because the difference in taste between the two beers was too obvious. After running back and forth, Kuluafu enjoyed Dashen beer while playing with his phone. Just then, Kuluafu saw an article on Facebook. The content of this article was exactly the same as the problem Apar encountered before. It was also because he drank Dashen beer before going online at the party and then replaced it with Shiyuan beer, causing the people at the party to be dissatisfied. Kuluafu thought for a moment, opened his Facebook, and wrote an article. Dashen beer usage guide. I'm a math student at UCLA. As a fan of Dashen beer, I have a passion for Dashen beer that's similar to drugs. Therefore, here, I will write a usage guide for Dashen beer. First, Dashen beer can't be mixed with other brands of beer because it will make you lose interest in the other beers. Second, Dashen beer is a very good party drink. Dashen beer can make the party more lively. Trust me, Dashen beer is the best choice for a party. Third, Dashen beer is also a very good condiment. Not long ago, I tried using Dashen beer to cook China's famous beer duck. I can't forget the taste for a long time. Every fan of Dashen beer, please try beer duck cooked with Dashen beer. The taste will definitely make you doubt your previous recipes. Fourth, please find a place close to Mara Supermarket to live because Dashen beer is only sold there. Fifth, please work hard to earn money because Dashen beer is 3 times more expensive than regular beer. As soon as Kuluafu posted this article, he immediately received a reply. Batman Forever replied, I'll add a 6th point. Dashen beer can be used to catch fish. Please don't doubt my opinion. I went fishing with my friends and poured Dashen beer into the river. In the end, a school of fish swam over. Soon, Kuluafu brought up this topic and received a lot of replies. Some people replied seriously, while others were joking. Chapter 1398. Kuluafu didn't expect that a random article he posted would become a hot topic. In just over 10 hours, this topic had garnered thousands of replies and tens of thousands of reposts. Kuluafu did not expect this, and neither did Denver. Because the topic started by his publicity department through the Internet Water Army didn't have the desired effect, and then it disappeared in the crowd. Even Shiyuan Beer didn't notice this topic. On the other hand, another topic had inexplicably become popular. It seemed that everyone was participating in the discussion about the more applications of Dashin beer. This topic actually gave rise to a second one. That was to use beer to make beer ducks. There was a netizen who used different brands of beer to make beer ducks. All the steps, portions, and ingredients were exactly the same. The only difference was the brand of beer. After more than a dozen servings of beer duck were made, they were eaten separately and given different scores. For some reason, Dashin beer had actually become a condiment in people's mouths. Of course, Denver did not care about this. No matter what happened to mountain beer, it was fine as long as the sales volume went up. Especially after Denver received the sales report for the past few days, he became even happier. In the past few days, the sales of Dashin beer had also gradually increased. The current sales volume was stable at around 150,000 cans per day. According to the initial high investment, selling 150,000 cans a day was already profitable. Of course, he still needed to maintain this level of sales. Chin, soaking in the desert Sistanch cup, descending the cormorant curtain. The reason why Denver was so diligent in reporting sales was not only to take credit, but also to give Chinxiang a chance. Imitation copy after all, no investor could last long if they were losing money every day. Even charity was about stability, let alone business investments. Chin, sizzle, dia, bramble with round branches. That twisting, and tearing, let's not talk about whether we can make money or not. First of all, we must not lose money. Nowadays, many of the new startups actually had potential. However, very few companies were able to persist past the initial stage, just because they couldn't maintain the supply of funds. Once the capital chain was broken, they could only resort to financing or loans. However, if it was a loan, the bank would need to observe the prospects. If the bank was not optimistic, then the bank would definitely not make a loss. Investors, on the other hand, were even more demanding. Investors not only looked at the progress of the investment, but also at the rate of return. Not every investor's needs were the same. Some investors wanted to wait for the company to go public and make a profit before leaving. Some investors wanted stable and sustainable profits. They wanted fixed assets and a certain amount of power to intervene and influence the company's decisions. Chin, Zi Lai Sherna glancing, sincerely flattering the peacock, throwing away a date with the crane, scolding the imperial carriage, deceiving the cormorant pouch. Iridium, Jia Huan scratches. This was enough to prove that Chin, squatting in the sun maybe Chin, bumping into the emperor and making a fool out of himself? The emperor is afraid of judgment and shocked to his grave? Shallow, squatting in the toilet, Samadhi hissing, please forgive me. Now Chin, is it Sistanch Guanadine? Ji Simi sailed to the former Chini? Right? Rui, more ferocious and stubborn. Jinba Straw Hat was a high-quality industry. A stable and appreciative industry was a high-quality industry. On the other hand, a fixed asset that could continuously and steadily generate profits was an excellent industry. For example, Marina's restaurant was an excellent business. Currently, 30% of Marina's restaurant's shares were in the hands of the bank. Words? Bow. Couple riding crutches? Resisting at the gorilla pond? Fu Wei. The bank was unwilling to give up the 30% shares. Of course, other than being unwilling to give up the shares, the bank did not dare to interfere with the restaurant's operation at all. The bank only wanted to hold shares and did not intend to destroy the normal operation of Marina's restaurant. Of course, Chin, Burden, Bao Jinchu, Huan Luo. Book poke yin chiyu? Grave joy deeming? 0% of the price. If Chin, did he dare to make a fool of himself? Zinc gap die pan frame but Chin? I dare to forgive you. There were slums in many big cities in the United States. The more prosperous the city, the more slums there were. It was the same in Los Angeles. There was the largest slum on the West Coast, Antwerp. Just like what people knew about slums, dirty and messy, could basically describe the impression that Antwerp gave people. The architectural style of the 1960s and 1970s and the poor community planning made it filled with an unbearable smell. There were lawbreakers wandering the streets. There was also a McDonald's, but the McDonald's checkout counter here was installed with bulletproof glass. More than 60% of the residents here had criminal records, and 20% of them were serious crimes. There had been sports stars and movie stars here before, but none of them were willing to admit that they were from Antwerp. That was because when people talked about this place, the first thing they thought of was criminals. Liam's son was a drug addict who relied on theft, robbery, and extortion to survive. Liam's son hadn't eaten for almost 2 days, but he had his eyes on a target. That person should have just come back from shopping. He was carrying food and a box of beer. Liam's son looked around. There weren't many people on the street at this time. Liam's son rushed up and strangled the man's neck. At the same time, he stabbed the man's waist with a dagger. "Buddy, hand over the money, or I'll kill you." "Don't hurt me. I don't have money." The man was so scared that he quickly took out his wallet. Liam's son snatched the man's wallet and glanced at it. Disappointment appeared on his face. There were only a few dollars in it. "Where's your credit card? Give me your credit card." "I don't have a credit card. I've already broken my promise. I don't have money to pay it back." Lien Musin rubbed his nose. He felt like his drug addiction was coming back. Liam's son glanced at the man, snatched the food and beer from his arms, turned around, and disappeared into the dark alley. He hurried back to his nest, and Liamson's feeling was getting worse. He was no stranger to this state. The drug addiction was acting up. Liam's son hurriedly opened the drawer. The tranquilizer was gone, and the tranquilizer was gone. He felt himself getting more and more miserable. Liam's son suddenly saw the beer. He wanted to get himself drunk. Maybe that would be the way to get through this drug addiction. This beer tastes good. Ever since I started taking drugs, I rarely touch alcoholic drinks. However, at that moment, Liam's son felt that the beer seemed to be good. For a moment, Liam's son forgot about his drug addiction acting up and started drinking can after can of beer. Until he was drunk, Liam's son had never slept so peacefully. When he woke up the next day, Liam's son found himself very energetic. It was a feeling that he had never felt before. Chapter 1399. "Mr. Denver, I saw an interesting post. Would you like to hear it?" the assistant said, standing next to Denver. As Denver's assistant, Milo basically had to intervene in everything. She was just advising Denver. "Oh, what is it?" "In Antwerp, there's a drug addict called Liam's son. He robbed a few local supermarkets to suppress his addiction." "What kind of news is that?" Denver asked, confused. This kind of thing happened every day in America, let alone in Antwerp. This Liam's son didn't rob money. He robbed beer. "Beer? Do drug addicts drink beer?" "I heard that they find beer extremely bitter when they drink it," Denver said, confused. "He wanted to rob our beer." "It said that the drug addict suppressed his addiction by drinking Dashen beer," Milo said. "He's arrested now, but he's been complaining about why only Mara's supermarket sells Dashen beer." Denver's eyes lit up. "Go and confirm if it's true. If it's true, make it a hot topic and increase the publicity." "Liam's son, someone wants to see you." Liam's son was curious who wanted to see him. He had no family now, and they were all disappointed in him. Of course, deep down, Liam's son still wanted to return to a normal life. However, his drug addiction couldn't calm him down. Liam's son walked to the visiting room dejectedly. He saw a beautiful but unfamiliar girl sitting outside the window. Liam's son sat in front of the girl. "Do I know you?" "Are you the Liam's son who robbed the supermarket?" Milo asked. "Are you a reporter?" Liam's son asked, squinting. "I'm not a reporter. I'm an employee of Dash and Beer," Milo said. "I'm interested in your story." Although Liam's son was a drug addict, he wasn't stupid. He vaguely sensed Milo's intention. "What do I get?" "I can bail you out, but you have to cooperate with our company's publicity." "Just bail me out." Liam's son obviously wanted more. "I won't give you money directly, but I can give you a chance." Milo said, "It's a chance for you to get back on track. In the next month, you can be sponsored by Dash and Beer. You can drink as much as you want and get rid of your drug addiction. After you are sentenced, our company will also actively help you get a chance to be released on parole, and then you can work in our company. Of course, just as an ordinary employee. If you can stay away from drugs for 6 months, you can get a reward of $10,000 in addition to your salary." Liam Muson's eyes flickered as he looked at Milo. He had to admit that he was tempted, not only for the chance to return to a normal life, but also for the dignified, beautiful, and generous girl in front of him. "Do you have a girlfriend?" Milo was stunned, but then she said proudly, "You don't deserve love now. You can ask me this question when you really give up drugs." "I accept your conditions," Liam Muson said. Generally speaking, 10 days was enough for a drug addict to get rid of his addiction. However, that was only a physical escape. The real difficulty was still the psychological one. Many drug addicts had entered rehab before, but the probability of relapse within 6 months was more than 90%. This was a psychological problem. Most of the time, they could not live a normal life. Their hearts were sensitive and fragile. The accumulated distress and depression were blocked in their hearts, and in the end, they would return to the path of no return. Milo did not want her boyfriend to be a drug addict. Of course, if Liam Muson gave up drugs, she did not mind giving this man a chance to pursue her. Everyone wanted a new life, even Liam Muson, even though he knew that this opportunity was based on his deeds. Then Denver began to use Liam Muson for various publicity. In the beginning, the publicity was not very effective. The United States was a sick country. Normal people did not care about the lives of drug addicts until a private rehab center announced that Dash and Beer had a very good suppressive effect on drug addiction and reduced the pain after the addiction flared up. That was when it really attracted the attention of the media. Denver obtained sales data. The highest single-day sales had exceeded 250,000 cans. Through market research, Denver found that the rehab centers had driven up sales. There were thousands of rehab centers in California, and most of them were private rehab centers. Many of these centers had started to use Dash and Beer to detoxify and suppress the pain of drug addiction. The sales of 250,000 cans in a single day not only made Dash and Beer the 6th best beer seller in California, but it also made Dash and Beer into the top 30 in the United States. Weston Lisa's expression grew uglier. It was no longer a matter of personal grudges anymore. It was the potential of Dash and Beer that made him deeply aware of the seriousness of the problem. Dash and Beer's increase in sales did not have much impact on the second and third tier brands. It was like a brand that sold 20,000 cans a day. Due to the increase in sales of Dash and Beer, their sales dropped to 18,000 cans. They would not blame Dash and Beer. However, the market would not suddenly expand. When the number of consumers was fixed, a new brand suddenly increased its sales, and most of the sales were from the first-tier brands. Weston Lees had been investigating the owner of Dash and Beer. However, he could not find out at all. Dash and Beer was not a listed company, so the owner's identity could not be disclosed. Weston Lees could not help but suspect that Dash and Beer was actually Denver's business. No, he couldn't let this go on. If this continued, the California market might be completely occupied by Dash and Beer. Although Shiyuan Beer was an international first-tier brand, they could not simply give up on a market. The California market was already very large. This made Weston Lease feel conflicted. Based on his understanding of Denver, they would not be satisfied with California. They would attack the United States and even the world's market. Chapter 1400. How did a big company attack a small company? One was to snipe at the channel. The first thing Wesley thought of was to pressure Mara's supermarket. Dashin beer was only available in Mara's supermarket. The operation was simple. Lower the price in exchange for Mara's supermarket support. At the same time, he subtly threatened that if Mara's supermarket didn't cooperate, Shiyuan beer would increase the price. Weinstein felt that Mara's supermarket should know how to choose. After all, Shiyuan beer's influence and scale couldn't be compared to Dashin beer. Of course, this couldn't be made public. Once it was made public, Shiyuan beer would be involved in unfair competition, just like the 3Q war. Weinstein received a reply in less than 20 minutes. Weston was delighted. It seemed that Mara's supermarket valued Shiyuan beer very much. They replied to his request so quickly. However, he didn't expect Mara's supermarket to reject Weinstein's request. They also announced that they would investigate whether Shiyuan beer had the right to be sold in Mara's supermarket. Wesley Leasy was furious at first, but he quickly regained his senses. They weren't superior and subordinate to Mara's supermarket. Mara's supermarket was a very important channel. If Mara's supermarket stopped selling Shiyuan beer, it wouldn't affect Shiyuan beer's sales in the short term. However, once this was exposed, the media, consumers, and even competitors would slander Shiyuan beer. Why did Mara's supermarket stop selling Shiyuan beer? Was it because there was a quality problem with Shiyuan beer? Or was it because Shiyuan beer didn't live up to its name? Mara's supermarket was a very important channel for alcohol products. At the same time, it had a lot of say. Thinking of this, Weinstein started sweating. He was too muddle-headed to do something like this. If the email he sent to Mara's supermarket was made public, he could only resign. Just as Weinstein worried, the email was quickly sent to Qin Shiyuan. Stop. Winnip wasn't stupid. Of course, she knew that there were other rules. Let's not talk about Qin Shiyuan first. Withdraw? Cut the scabbard, just talk about Qin Shiyuan? Cone Nalian? Mechanical Scratch Ba? Balance Alliance? Shiyuan beer wasn't bad. Although it was an international first-tier brand, it wasn't a dominant brand. However, Shiyuan beer was not a dominant beer brand. In fact, until now, no beer brand dared to say that they were dominant. As a result, even if Mara's supermarket didn't have Shiyuan beer, consumers would still choose other brands of beer. They wouldn't say that they didn't have Shiyuan beer. But Mara's supermarket really needed Dashin beer. Even though Dashin beer was currently ranked 6th on the daily beer sales list in California, it was the most popular beer brand in Mara's supermarket. Dashin beer was not available in other supermarkets and distribution channels. This limited the development of Dashin beer. However, this was related to the production of Dashin beer. Once Mountain Beer's production increased, it would definitely be able to compete for the top sales position in California. It was ridiculous that the head of Joy Beer, Willie Leasy, wanted to threaten Mara's supermarket with this. The 5th most popular beer brand in Mara's supermarket was threatening to remove the number 1 beer brand from the shelves by raising the price of its supply. Was this a joke? One could imagine the importance of Dashin beer to Mara's supermarket. It was also very important to Winnip's future plans for the American supermarket chain. In the future, Mara supermarkets would be set up all over the U.S. If other supermarkets did not have Dashin beer, but Mara supermarkets did, then customers would be more likely to come to Mara supermarkets. Of course, Winnip was more willing to work with Qin Xiaobei. Words? Huh? Capture? Moo. See? Wien so, she forwarded the email from Willie Reese to Qin Xiaobei. Zhu. Colorful camouflage? Melia for Qin. Zhua. Sigue puppet? Polypus? See-through? Ah, Mr. Denver, I have an email. Take a look and see if you can use it. Denver to pick up Qin? Chase him? Blowing at the beginning? Xing Fu poked a locust tree? Qingyanji? Choking disease. Did Mara's supermarket give it to you? Denver asked curiously. Well, do you think this letter is useful? Yes, but not now, Denver said. Why? Mr. Chen, holding the cards in your hands is more effective than playing them, Denver said with a smile. As his own partner, Denver is happy to give Chen Zigawai like a nuclear weapon? Yes, you're right. Denver smiled and said, I know Willie Lease very well. He used to be my subordinate. He is talented, but he is not the kind of person who will sacrifice himself for the company's benefit. This kind of person is easy for us to use. All right, I won't interfere in this matter. According to our previous agreement, you can get 5% of the shares. When you are free, you can come and sign this document. The shares were not given for free. Denver also had to pay for them. This was a legal sale of shares. Based on the current sales volume of more than 250,000 cans per day, the annual sales could reach about $400 million, and the net profit could possibly exceed $50 million. Then the market valuation would be at least $500 million. 5% of the shares was $25 million. Chin, bumping into Ji Jiujian and Mo pie dumplings, oyster flood, play with benzene and uranium legs, shouts and shrugs, diced fern at dusk. Even if Denver didn't have the money, he would find his way to buy it. Mr. Chin, other than these 5 shares, I hope that I can get more shares in the future. At most, no more than 20. A burden? Beautiful and vulgar purple oyster on the one hand. To win Denver's heart, he had to give him enough benefits. Denver's methods these days, Chin? Robbing? Yanjun? Jiannan? Kinexan? Huang Yu? Bad Jiao? Neon Punglai? Jiao Ni, Miao Ni? Xian? Stirring? Jiao Ni? Salt of Liddy drought? Break points and try to flatter Zhang? Moist, cormorant, sigma color dispatch locusts? 20% of the shares was enough to tie Denver to Dash and Beer. Also, I have to make something clear to you. Dash and Beer will not be listed. If you want to make money through the shares, I'm afraid you will be disappointed. Chin, I got it. Denver understood Chen. Denver understood that Chen, perhaps going public, could make a lot of money and increase Dash and Beer's valuation. But that was all virtual wealth. It didn't represent real value. Chapter 1401. Of course, not going public also meant that Denver would never have the chance to actually control Mountain Beer. He would always be a major shareholder. If Mountain Beer went public, Chen Zhao's shares could be continuously diluted through the stock market. But if it didn't go public, as long as Chen Zhao didn't sell his shares, no one could replace him. Of course, Mountain Beer's profit prospects were very good. It was even more than those so-called super companies. For example, Goose's market value was $800 billion, but its net profit was only $3 billion. Goose's market value was in the top 10 in the world, but its net profit wasn't even in the top 100. If they were Goose's shareholders and only wanted to earn money from Goose's dividends, they probably wouldn't be able to recoup their losses. But for a brand with high net profit like Mountain Beer, they might be able to recoup their losses in a few years. It would be sustainable for the rest of their lives. Right now, Chen Zhao was basically living a secluded life. In about a week, Fei Lai's due date would be here. Chun Zhao estimated that he would have to send Fei Lai to the hospital in a few days. Fei Lai, do you think we should go to the hospital? Chun Zhao asked. Fei Lai shook her head. No, I don't think it's that fast. Let's go in a few days. Fei Lai didn't want to stay in a hospital filled with the smell of medicine for a few days. Chin, you don't know how to deliver a baby? Fei Lai wanted to give birth at home. Chun Zhao smiled bitterly. He knew all the knowledge about delivering a baby. However, he hadn't delivered a baby yet. His home wasn't as good as the hospital. If it was a natural birth, it would be fine. At most, it would be slightly painful. He could also give Fei Lai a painless delivery. However, if it was a difficult birth, it wouldn't be a problem of pain. It would be fatal. By then, he wouldn't be able to do anything. So Chen Zhao felt that sending Fei Lai to the hospital was the safest choice. Forget it. He would observe first. There was still some time. The next day, Chen Zhao received another call from Denver. Mr. Chen, Weston Lease is representing Happy Beer. He wants to buy Mountain Beer for $600 million. Huh. Chen Zhao chuckled. Not selling. I know, Denver said. I'm just doing my job to inform you. Even he felt that Weston Lease's offer was too strange. Big companies suppressed small companies. If they couldn't kill them, they would buy them. This was the most common trick. When a large company makes an irresistible offer to a threatening small company, most small companies will succumb to the huge temptation and sell their company. But Weston Lease's offer was a little insulting. His offer was more in line with the market valuation, but the key was that the brand of Dashin beer was still on the rise. In less than a month, the product had already reached 250,000 cans of sales. It was foreseeable that the profit would be far higher than the market valuation. If he were to make an offer of $600 million, he would be making things difficult for himself and disgusting Denver at the same time. Mr. Chen, I plan to have my company shoot a new commercial. Didn't we already advertise before? It's only been 20 days, and now we're filming again. Isn't it too impatient? It's not the same. The previous advertisements were used on second and third tier TV stations. Now, I plan to place the advertisements on ABC. ABC is one of the top 5 TV stations. That kind of low-quality advertisement will not only not have a good effect, it is very likely to lower our brand value. If you think it's necessary, then go ahead, Chen Zhao said. Mr. Chen, I don't have time these few days, Denver said. I need to go to Denver to prepare for the beer festival and rent the venue and booth. Participating in the beer festival was something they'd planned long ago. Do you need me to do it? Chen Zhao asked. You better do it. Okay. Give me the contact number of the advertising company. I'll find time to talk to them in the next 2 days. The next day, before Chen Zhao left, he reminded Fei Lai again and again. Chin, I'm not a kid anymore. If my stomach hurts, I'll call an ambulance immediately. Chen Zhao thought about it. How about I don't go out? It's not something important, anyway. Fei Lai was helpless against Chen Zhao's strange love. In order to take care of herself, Chen Zhao even put down his business. Chin, get out of here and work right now. Okay. Chen Zhao glanced at the time and estimated when he would leave. Chen Zhao arrived at the advertising company. He'd already talked to the advertising company yesterday. When Chen Zhao arrived, a woman stood at the door to welcome him. Miss, have we met before? Chen Zhao didn't want to flirt with the woman. She really looked familiar. The woman glanced at Chen Zhao. Sir, I'm Navat's singer. That night, I was with Dahlia and saw you on the way. Ah, I remember now. Chen Zhao patted his head. It wasn't that Chen Zhao was forgetful, but that he hadn't paid much attention to Navat's that night. This is Dahlia's company? Chen Zhao didn't expect to find Stephen's daughter's company after looking around. Yes, please follow me. Navat's singer brought Chen Zhao to the advertising company. When Chen Zhao stood at the door, Dahlia was clearly surprised too. Looking at Navat's beside her, Dahlia still didn't understand. Mr. Chin, what are you doing? Boss, he's our client. Navat's still called Dahlia boss in the company. Mr. Chin, you're our client? Yes. I'm here on behalf of Mountain Beer to discuss an advertising partnership with you. Chen Zhao nodded. Can we get to the main topic now? Of course. Daly more quickly composed herself. She nodded and said to Navat Singh, Go gather the people from the creative planning department. Gather in the conference room. Chen Zhao was the client, while Dahlia and her advertising company were the client. So, Chen Zhao could make most requests, regardless of whether they were reasonable or not. However, Chen Zhao didn't understand advertising. Moreover, Dahlia's proposal was still at the copywriting stage. Then the director would explain it. Chen Zhao only understood a little. Mr. Chen, what do you think of our proposal? Is there anything that needs to be changed? This not bad. What's the budget? Chen Zhao asked. Chapter 1402. Daily Moore's company mainly did advertising planning, creativity, and filming. Of course, compared to shooting commercials, the income from advertising planning and creativity was insignificant. If they could get a job to shoot a commercial, the minimum would be 1 or 2 million USD, and the maximum would be more than 10 million USD. The company would be responsible for arranging the director, actors, and props, and they would be able to get a generous remuneration. And then there would be labor fees. Chen Zhao felt that Daily Moore's company's idea was good. After some consideration, he accepted Daily Moore's suggestion. Chen Zhao didn't plan on haggling, not because of anything else, but because this company belonged to Daily Moore, Stephen's daughter. It was troublesome to do business with acquaintances. If Chen Zhao had known that the company belonged to Daily Moore, he definitely wouldn't have come personally. But since he'd already discussed it, Chen Zhao could only accept. At least, if the conditions and proposal weren't bad, he would definitely give it to acquaintances first. Regardless of whether it was at home or abroad, this was an extremely common occurrence. After all, this was a society that valued relationships. Mr. Chen, let's eat together. Daily Moore knew that Chen Zhao was from China. Chinese people usually got close to each other at the dining table. Chen Zhao looked at the time and hesitated. Mr. Chen, are you in a hurry? Let's go. Chen Zhao smiled. Chen Zhao didn't have a good impression of Daily Moore, but he wouldn't cut ties with her for the rest of his life just because of the small conflict at the beginning. Plus, putting aside Daily Moore's relationship with Stephen, they were still partners now. Of course, it was impossible for them to be as close as Stephen's or even Zola's. Chen Zhao and Dahlia's conversation was still a bit distant. Nawat's hinges went with them. Actually, Daily Moore wanted to get closer to Chen Zhao through another method. That was the topic the three of them had in common: magic. In the restaurant, Not Singh started a conversation. Mr. Chen, what magic system do you specialize in? Specialize? Strengthening, I guess. Chen Zhao thought for a moment and answered, but I'm learning more complicated magic. I've dabbled in clone, spiritual, and elemental magic. If you want to make progress in magic, it's best to focus on one type of magic. Coming into contact with too many isn't beneficial. Also, a male spiritualist has limited magic power. There's no point in learning too much magic, Navat said, sounding like a senior. Of course, she believed that she had the right to do so. Also, strengthening spells are harmful to the body, so you should exercise more, Mr. Chin. I've heard of spiritualists who specialize in strengthening spells. When they get older, their bodies aren't in good shape. When they're young, they use strengthening spells too often, which causes a heavy burden on their bodies. Miss Navats, what is your specialization? I specialize in exploration and perception. I'm not in the big system, Navats said nonchalantly. I don't know much about this system, Chen Zhao said curiously. Can you explain? It was not that he wanted to learn this system of magic, but he wanted to understand it. Although detection and perception wasn't a combat spell, Navat Singh wasn't completely defenseless. In the magic world, there was another name for detection and perception magic. It was called the 50-50 system. This kind of spiritualist would have a 50-50 chance of winning, even against opponents much stronger than them. The so-called 50-50 chance didn't mean that they would win or lose. It meant that they could tie most of the time, or both sides would be heavily injured. Do you mind if I use a spell on you? Navat Singh asked. Go ahead. Navats pointed her finger between her eyebrows and glared at Chen Zhao. Suddenly, Chen Zhao felt a wave of magic from Navat's body. The next moment, a smile appeared on Navat's face. Mr. Chen, your weakness is your left arm? Chen Zhao couldn't deny this. After all, his left arm was indeed weaker than his right arm. Navat Singh picked up the knife and fork on the table and stabbed her right arm. Chen Zhao felt a stab on his left arm. Chen Zhao was a bit surprised. Is this damage duplication? No, it's weakness reflection, Navat said. I can copy your weakness, and then hurt you by hurting my weakness. Not Singh said. Navat suddenly put more force into her knife and fork. She'd wanted to make a small cut on her arm as a demonstration, but she couldn't. No matter how much force she used, she still couldn't cut it open. Navat's expression didn't change. It seemed that this Asian was quite strong. Such a small attack was useless against him. Chen Zhao thought of the weakness. Mirror image could indeed be a threat to him. After all, his weakness was exposed to the opponent, and the opponent could attack him at will. Is this a perfect spell? Chen Zhao asked. Navat shook her head with a smile. To her, Chen Zhao's ability to say something like this meant that he wasn't very skilled. He could actually say something so childish. How can perfect spells exist in this world? Navat shook her head with a smile. For example, I'm hurting you through weakness reflection, but I'm also hurt. Then can't you just cast a healing spell on yourself? Actually, there are many ways to make up for it. Different situations require different methods, but that's not a spell, let alone a perfect spell. Navat Singh felt that Chen Zhao was only slightly better than Delamore. Occasionally, he would ask some questions that she thought were childish. However, this was understandable. Not every spiritualist had a complete legacy. Of course, with the mentality of educating a junior, Navat was happy to give Chen Zhao professional guidance. Chen Zhao didn't notice Navat's disdain. Instead, he'd learned a lot of magic knowledge from Navat. Usually in the association, everyone was in awe of him. What he said was the truth. Chapter 1403. On the other hand, Chen Zhao was having a great time chatting with Knots. Unlike the people in the association who always had to put on airs, Chen Zhao really learned a lot from Knots. At the very least, everyone looked at things from a different perspective. Knots was a bit of a teacher, but other than that, there wasn't anything wrong with her. Just then, the lights in the restaurant lit up. The sky outside the window seemed to have darkened. Dark clouds covered all of Los Angeles. Just then, the TV hanging in the restaurant reported a piece of news. According to the weather satellite, the first Pacific tropical cyclone of the year would land on the west coast in the next 3 days. The wind could reach level 16. This weather is so uncomfortable. Chen Zhao looked outside the window. The dark clouds reminded him of the sky when he'd fought the source of corruption. This time the sky was similar, but he didn't feel any magical aura. It's been 13 years since the last reverse tropical cyclone made landfall on the west coast. Every time a reverse tropical cyclone makes landfall on the west coast, it brings something unclean, Navat said. There's something like that. In the east, it's called a typhoon. In North America, it's called a hurricane. But most tropical cyclones move along the path of the Earth's rotation. In China's Taoism, it's called gathering the sun. Typhoons bring destruction, but they also bring life, Knot said. Reverse tropical cyclones go against the Earth's rotation, so it's called ascending to the underworld. Chen Zhao basically knew nothing about Taoism. He wasn't even as knowledgeable as a foreigner like Knots. What's ascending to the underworld? It blows in energy to the west coast, Knot said. Normal people will get sick when exposed to large amounts of energy, so I can foresee that there'll be a lot of sick people on the west coast in the future. That's great. Great? Why? I'm a doctor, Chen Zhao said matter-of-factly. Is there anything more enjoyable than more patients? Also, it's best not to go out when a tropical cyclone passes by, in case you get into trouble. Chen Zhao rolled his eyes. Who would go out during a typhoon? The last time a tropical cyclone landed in North America, it also blew a ghost ship to the west coast. It was just a ghost ship. Chen Zhao didn't care at all. Of course, it was best not to go out during a typhoon. Fei Lai's due date was in a few days. He had to send her to the hospital as soon as possible. It would be troublesome if Typhoon triumphantly gave birth. When Chen Zhao walked out of the restaurant, a green bolt of lightning flashed across the sky. Chen Zhao frowned. It was windy. The wind was really uncomfortable. The tropical cyclone hadn't even made landfall yet, but they could already feel the threatening yin qi in the wind. Navots frowned as well. "What's wrong, Singer?" Dalymore asked. "This pressure reminds me of the third night that happened in downtown Los Angeles 2 years ago." Chen Zhao was about to part ways with them, but after hearing Navot's words, he couldn't help but ask, "Do you think this tropical cyclone is similar to third night?" "I can't say for sure, but the signs of weather change will only appear on the third night. According to the weather station's weather report, the tropical cyclone will make landfall in 3 days. If someone was awakening for the third night, it would be impossible for this sign to appear on the first day. I still have something to do. I'm leaving." Chen Zhao's expression suddenly turned serious. Looking at Chen Zhao's departing figure, Navots touched her left arm. "Dalymore, it's best not to go out these few days." "What's wrong? Is it because of the hurricane? Did you forget what I said? Last time, a ghost ship was blown ashore. People really died then." Navots looked around again. "This is really uncomfortable. Singer, come stay at my place for a few days," Dalymore said. "I'm a bit scared by myself. I'm also planning to give my employees a few days off. I'll go back to work after the tropical cyclone passes." "Sure." Nawat Singh looked around, the uncomfortable feeling getting more obvious. "Dalymore, you drive." Sitting in the car, Nawat Singh started using magic. Dahlia had been learning magic from Navots for a while. She could feel the mana undulations coming from Navots' body. However, she didn't understand what spell Navots was using from the car. Suddenly, images flashed through Navots' mind. A pair of eyes was staring at her. That bad feeling came from that pair of eyes staring at him. "Dalymore, stop the car. I might need to deal with some trouble." "Here? There are so many people here. Are you sure you want to fight someone here?" "I don't want to cause trouble for you. I'm your student. Did you forget?" Navots hesitated for a moment. "All right then, drive the car to a more secluded place. Do you know who's causing trouble for you?" "I'm probably from a Roma family," Navot said. "I don't have any enemies. It can only be people from my family." "Why would someone from the same family cause trouble for you?" "My family has a custom. Every awakened witch in the family can inherit a magic tool. Of course, I also inherited a magic tool. Magic tools are very rare, and the number of magic tools in the family is limited. It's first come, first served, and the latecomers don't have a chance. They either have to wait for the previous witch to die and then inherit it, or snatch it from other witches. The people who came to find trouble with me probably had this intention. Through my ESP vision, I felt that those eyes belonged to people that I've seen before. No matter how I counted, there were only a few people that I had seen before." "What magic tool did you inherit?" Nawat's shingles pointed to the earrings in her ears. Dalymore looked at Navot's earrings. They were made of silver and had 2 small stars on them. The design was quite unique. Chapter 1404. "This place is fine," Nawat Singh said. This place was remote enough that they couldn't see any buildings in front or behind them. "Is someone following us?" Daramore asked hesitantly. "He's already here." "Where?" "There are no cars on the road." Navots looked to the side of the road. She had already sensed the person's location. "Come out, Ocula." A gust of wind blew past, and a red-haired woman walked out. The woman wore exquisite makeup, a black dress and dark red high heels. Her wavy hair was wrapped around her chest, and she crossed her arms as she walked over. "Hi, sister." Okula waved her hand lightly with a charming smile on her face. Daily Moore turned to look at Nawat Singh. Your sister? Nawat looked at Okula coldly. It was obvious that the relationship between the two sisters was not good. It could even be said to be bad, very bad. Are you going to show off your little animals again? Nawat Singh's tone carried a hint of mockery. The corner of Okula's mouth twitched. Her sister's words had clearly hit her sore spot. But very quickly, Okula regained his composure. It's different this time. I found a new toy. Just as Nawat was about to release the weakness mirror image, he suddenly remembered that the weakness mirror image he used before hadn't been removed. Nawat raised his left arm. Just as he was about to remove the weakness image, a sudden gust of wind blew past. A bloody mouth bit down on Nawat Singh's left arm. Ah! Dahlia was startled. It was a jackal with gray spots all over its body, but this jackal was a little scary. When Okula saw that Nawat Singh was hit, he became more and more pleased with himself. At that moment, an even larger jackal appeared beside Okula. Dozens of equally large jackals surrounded Nawat and Daily Moore. These giant jackals seemed to have appeared out of thin air. He hadn't even noticed their existence before. Sister, aren't you surprised now? Okula said proudly, I named them wind-howling beasts. They were modified by a pack of jackals. Nawat said coldly, you still haven't changed your old tricks. You're still using invisible wind and gigantification. Other than that, you don't have any other tricks. But you still fell for it. It doesn't matter if it's an old trick or not, as long as it works. It works? Nawat sneered and suddenly pulled with force with his left arm. A whir! The jackal that was biting Nawat's left arm suddenly let out a blood-curdling screech and fell to the ground, spitting out blood. Okula's expression changed drastically. What was going on? Why wasn't she hurt? Could it be that Nawat learned enhancement magic? Okula's face was filled with confusion, but she didn't hesitate and immediately ordered the other jackals to attack Nawat Singh. Only then did Nawat truly use the power of his left arm. The weak spot mirror image could copy the enemy's weak spot, but it would also copy the characteristics of that spot. However, Nawat also didn't understand why his left arm, which was supposed to be his weak spot, was so terrifying. A jackal pounced on her. Nawat didn't even have time to react, but her left arm had already reacted. Nawat raised her left arm and grabbed the jackal's head in the air. Then she crushed it. This action stunned both Daily Moore and Okula. Daily Moore had heard from Nawat that she wasn't good at fighting, but now it seemed that Nawat was being too humble when she said that she wasn't good at fighting. Okula felt even more incredulous. Daily Moore might have thought that Nawat Shingles was being modest, but Okula Shingles knew her sister very well. She didn't understand why her sister, who wasn't good at fighting, would suddenly change her style. Moreover, she chose the enhancement magic that didn't suit her at all. It was like changing subjects halfway through a university course. She'd been studying math, but she went to practice sports. Very few witches would play enhancement magic. On one hand, it was because women's stamina wasn't as good as men's, so their enhancement magic wasn't as effective. On the other hand, witches generally had higher magic power than men. They had more choices than enhancement magic. But why did Nawat Singh, who was not trained properly, have such great power? As a matter of fact, even Nawat herself was dumbfounded. His left arm was supposed to be his weakness, but wasn't it a little too obvious? Just then, two more jackals attacked from the left and right. Nawat Singh's left arm was faster, and his methods were more brutal. She grabbed the car beside her and swung it around. The two jackals were smashed to pieces. Although these jackals were controlled by Okula Singh, they weren't mindless creatures. They were also fearful. After Nawat killed a few of their companions, no jackals dared to come forward anymore. Nawat was envious of her left arm that didn't belong to her. Not only did this left arm possess immense strength, but its instinctive reaction had also become muscle memory. She didn't even need to worry. The arm could sense battle and danger on its own. Unfortunately, Weakness Mirror had a time limit. It would probably be over in a few minutes. It seemed that the man was stronger than she'd imagined. However, was his left arm really his weakness? Was it so strong and hard to deal with? Or had her spell gone wrong? She hadn't used Weakness Mirror just now, but Ability Mirror. Unlike Weakness Mirror Image, Ability Mirror Image was more difficult to cast. Nawat's Shingles had been practicing it for years, and still hadn't learned it. Could it be that he had accidentally used his mirror image ability? Was that why she'd gotten Chen Zhao's ability? In fact, his true strength was in his left arm. Ocula, disappear from my sight immediately. Otherwise, I might not be able to control myself and crush your jaw. Ocula's face was ashen. He had come to find Nawats with confidence, but he didn't expect to be slapped in the face by her. Chapter 1405. After Okula Singh left, Nawat Singh suddenly sat on the ground. Seeing this, Daily Moore hurried over to help Nawat Singh. Singh, what's wrong? I'm fine. Let me sit on the ground for a while. Nawat Singh had a good time just now, but that arm wasn't hers. As the magic disappeared, the burden came with it. You had to pay interest when you borrowed something from someone else. If Okula hadn't been scared away, Nawats would probably have lost. Do we go to the hospital? Daily Moore asked. Nawats shook her head. She couldn't even be bothered to talk now. After sitting on the ground for more than half an hour, she finally got into the car with Daily Moore's help. The car had been swung around by Nawats, but apart from some blood and 2 not-so-obvious dents, there wasn't any other damage. Singh, what happened just now? That was the ability spell I used on Mr. Chin earlier, Nawats said. I borrowed his strongest ability. Nawats was now very sure that he must have accidentally used his mirror image ability. Is this the power of strengthening magic? Yes, strengthening magic is best at fighting. It has powerful attack and resistance, but its weakness is also very obvious, Nawat said. It's too much of a burden on the body. Seeing Chen Zhao return, Feilai's expression became nervous. Chin, what's wrong? Feilai, I think you're due soon. How about we go to the hospital? No. Feilai shook her head immediately. According to the weather report, a tropical cyclone might land on the west coast in the next 3 days. Then we'll wait for it to pass. Can you control the child in your stomach? Of course. She listens to me. Chen Zhao was helpless. Feilai was so determined, so he could only give up on sending her to the hospital for now. Let me do a check. Chen Zhao started examining Feilai and the baby in her stomach. It wasn't just a routine check. Chen Zhao also used magic to check their vitals. Suddenly, he sensed that the baby's heart rate was extremely low. Chen Zhao was shocked. He glanced at Feilai from the corner of his eye, but his expression did not change. A fetus heart rate was usually higher than an adult's, but their child's heart rate was so low that Chen Zhao had to be careful. There were many possibilities for a low fetal heart rate. It could be a problem with the mother, but Feilai was healthy and paid attention to her diet. There shouldn't be any problems. Otherwise, it was the fetus's own problem. Although the child hadn't been born yet, he was already conscious. Even in her stomach, the child was still very active. Perhaps he was tired of playing. Chen Zhao was very nervous. Had this always been a problem, or had it just appeared? Is there a problem with the child's development? He had been to the hospital several times before, but there were no problems with the child's development. Then it should be a temporary problem. He sent his magic power into Feilai's body. As expected, Chen Zhao realized that the child was wrapping the umbilical cord around his neck, but he couldn't break free. In the end, he choked himself until he fainted. Chen Zhao was a bit angry. This little bastard hadn't even been born yet, and he was already looking for trouble for himself and his mother. If he'd wrapped the umbilical cord like this on the day of delivery, he wouldn't have been able to give birth naturally. Thankfully, the umbilical cord wasn't completely tied up. After the little bastard fainted, it loosened on its own. The little bastard suddenly moved and opened his eyes. He seemed to have seen something. Chen Zhao suddenly realized that his magic power was being absorbed. Fei Lai wasn't a spiritualist. She couldn't absorb magic power. Chen Zhao frowned. Was it the little bastard absorbing the magic power? Just then, the little bastard fell into a deep sleep again, but now his body was much more stable. Chen Zhao heaved a sigh of relief. Fei Lai rubbed her stomach gently. Just then, another emergency alert appeared on the TV. According to the satellite photos sent by NASA to the Weather Bureau, a tropical cyclone was evolving in the Pacific Ocean 1,400 kilometers southwest of the West Coast. The winds at the center of the tropical cyclone had reached 200 kilometers per hour, reaching the peak of a Category 3 hurricane. At present, the tropical cyclone was still strengthening. In the next 24 hours, the tropical cyclone was likely to reach Category 5 or above. The Weather Bureau officially named the cyclone which. Chen Zhao found it hard to breathe. He could feel that the cyclone was coming for his family. It was a life-and-death crisis. What was a Category 5 hurricane? The Weather Bureau divided hurricanes into 5 levels. A speed of 119 to 153 kilometers per hour was Category 1. 154 to 177 kilometers per hour was Category 2. 178 to 209 kilometers per hour was Category 3. 210 to 248 kilometers per hour was Category 4. And 249 kilometers per hour or above was Category 5. The tropical cyclone was forming now. It hadn't reached its peak yet, but it had already reached Category 3. This meant that when it hit the West Coast, it might reach Category 5 or above. How much damage could a Category 5 hurricane cause? A Category 5 hurricane in 2005 had caused $200 billion in economic losses. 2,000 people had died and hundreds of thousands had lost their homes. This was America, the most developed country in the world. Of course, America's rescue system had always been criticized by others. If it was just a hurricane, Chen Zhao wouldn't care. But he was afraid that it wasn't just a hurricane. If that was the death of the little bastard in Fei Lai's stomach, then today would be the first night. The hurricane would come the day after tomorrow. What if Fei Lai went into labor? No, not if. Fei Lai would definitely go into labor the night after tomorrow. Chen Zhao couldn't help Fei Lai give birth and protect her at the same time. It was impossible to send Fei Lai to the hospital. If he did, there might be more casualties. Chen Zhao called for take tomorrow and the day after tomorrow off. Come to my house. Why? I'm a bit busy with work. Your sister's labor will be in these 2 days. You can send her to the hospital. I don't plan on sending her to the hospital, Chen Zhao said. Also, I've never delivered a baby before. Me neither. I'm an oncologist. I know how to deliver a baby, but I've never done it. I trust you. For was going crazy. She didn't understand what Chen Zhao was doing. What's the use of trusting me? You're going to bet Fei Lai and her baby? Chapter 1406. For hurried to Mirror Lake and stared at Chen Zhao and Fei Lai aggressively. Actually, Fei Lai didn't know what Chen Zhao meant either. Don't look at me. Ask Chen if you have any questions, Fei Lai said as she caressed her big belly. The hurricane is coming the day after tomorrow. I'm afraid that the hospital will lose power that night. The hospital has a backup generator. For looked at Chen Zhao. You're not worried at all. It's a tradition from my hometown. Do you think I'm an idiot? For stared at Chen Zhao with a dark expression. Actually, Fei Lai said that she wants to give birth at home. Did I say that? I thought you didn't want to go to the hospital? For stared at Chen Zhao. Chin, tell me honestly. Why? As long as you help me this time, I'll give you as much purple brew, nameless wine, and Dashin beer as you want this year and tomorrow. For also knew that Chen Zhao had made Daydream, purple brew, nameless wine, and Dashen beer. However, due to her income, she really couldn't afford anything other than Dashen beer. Although she also belonged to the high-income group, the price of the first 3 types of wine was not something that ordinary middle-class people could afford. Chin, are you sure you want Phalai to take the risk? Neither you nor I are gynecologists. There's also no hospital here to deliver baby. It'll be risky for both of us. I can create the conditions. Chun Zhao and Blackie's lab was in Blackie's spatial crevice. There were many medical tools and equipment inside. As long as Chun Zhao brought out the instruments and tools, it would be fine. It wasn't a big problem. The problem was tools, equipment are not a problem. I have all the equipment for delivering a baby. I'll set up an operating room tonight. The basement was a semi-enclosed space. Even if there was a hurricane or even a flood, as long as the stairs were sealed, the basement wouldn't be affected. But there's another problem that you need to be prepared for. What problem? You might be the only one when delivering the baby. What do you mean? You're going out? Phalai is about to give birth. You're going out? For asked. I'm not going out. I just said that I might be busy with other things while delivering Phalai. What are you busy with? What's more important than Phalai's labor? 4. Stop asking. Phalai had a premonition. Are you busy with something? Anyway, it's very complicated. Don't ask anymore. Of course it's complicated if I don't explain it clearly. Once I explain it clearly, it won't be complicated anymore. For stubbornly wanted to know the truth. For was very familiar with Chun Zhao. His medical skills were excellent and he loved Phalai very much. It was understandable if he wanted to deliver Phalai himself. Geniuses were always extreme. They were more willing to believe in themselves than others. However, Chun Zhao didn't want to send Phalai to the hospital. He also didn't want to help her deliver the baby. This was hard for 4 to understand. To put it simply, on the day Phalai gives birth, bad people will come and steal our child. So, I need you to deliver the baby, and I'll protect it. Do you understand? Why not hand it over to the police? How much do you think the police can do in a Category 5 hurricane? Who wants to steal your child? What a bunch of lunatics. Are you serious? For stared at Chun Zhao seriously. Of course. Would I joke with Phalai's and the child's lives? For rubbed her forehead. Fine, I'll believe you for now. But I'm really not confident that I can deliver Phalai's child alone. Chun Zhao rubbed his chin and thought for a while. How about I kidnap a team of gynecologists from the hospital? You're kidding me. Finally comforting 4. Phalai couldn't help but ask at night. Chin, what's going on? Our child might be a witch, Chin Zhao said helplessly. Phalai's face was filled with surprise. Really? Our child is a witch? Do you have to be so excited? Of course. Our child will definitely inherit your magic talent. Okay, rest first. I'll go prepare for the surgery. The best outcome would be a natural delivery, but it was necessary to be safe. Chen Zhao didn't want any problems on this. For Phalai's delivery, Chen Zhao had to consider all aspects. There was also another piece of news that made Chen Zhao uneasy. The tropical cyclone had strengthened to Category 5 as it approached the west coast, and it was currently traveling at 260 kilometers per hour. The hurricane that had caused great damage on the west coast in 2005 had a speed of 280 kilometers per hour. The tropical cyclone this time was approaching the speed of the last one, and there were still about 48 hours left. Based on the development of the witch, this tropical cyclone was still showing signs of strengthening. It might even reach 300 kilometers per hour. The destructive power of a 300 kilometers per hour hurricane wasn't just the wind, but also the huge waves. Moreover, the mirror lake villa that Robio had designed for Qinzhao could only reach 250 kilometers per hour at most. If the wind exceeded 300 kilometers per hour, it would cause great damage to the villa. Of course, this wasn't the main problem. The main problem was the safety of Phalai, for Jerlin and the little witch in Feilai's stomach. Chen Zhao wanted to ask the association for help. They actually weren't weak. However, they didn't have to face the attack of the third night first, but the storm. Under the wind of 300 kilometers per hour, Chen Zhao would give them a promotion and a raise if they could stand still, let alone fight. Eugenius, can you make the trees around Mirror Lake grow taller? Master, this requires more magic. Chen Zhao took out more angelic crystals. As a tree spirit, Eugenius was the only one among Chen Zhao's pets that could use angelic crystals. Moreover, angelic crystals could promote the growth of plants. I'll give you as much as you want. Make these plants grow to their limit. Black Ma, White Ma, go chase the cows and sheep into the forest, especially when the storm comes. Don't let the wind blow our cows away. Amon, if the wind is blowing from the other side of Mirror Lake, once it forms a wave, you'll be responsible for calming it down. If the wave is more than 5 meters high, I'll make you swim around the Pacific Ocean 10 times. Chapter 1407. The next morning, for was astonished by the surgery room that Chen Zhao had assembled in one night. The water in this tank is from the lake, Chen Zhao said. It can be used for water delivery. Don't worry about the water quality. It won't harm Feilai or the baby, nor will it get infected. Water delivery was a type of painless delivery, but the analgesic effect wasn't great. Feilai might not use this method when she was in labor. Right now, painless delivery technology was very mature. Chen Zhao had even prepared an analgesic device for intraspinal delivery. Chen, do you know how to inject analgesics into the spinal canal? I don't. Chen Zhao shook his head. I don't know either, For said. Chen Zhao and Four knew the theory, but they needed clinical experience to actually do it. Then we better find an anesthetist. An anesthetist with a painless delivery certificate had to have interned with the attending for at least a year, observing or assisting more than 20 times. Only then could he have the right to do it alone. Anesthesia for pregnant women was injected into the spinal canal. The technology was very mature, but there was a strict limit to the amount of injection. Usually it was injected into the subarachnoid space. Too much wouldn't be good for the mother or the baby, but too little wouldn't have the analgesic effect. Moreover, the analgesic process was continuous. It would be injected every few to 10 minutes. Different levels of analgesic would be given according to the mother's pain level. Do you know a doctor? Chen Zhao asked. Yes. Invite him over. It's best if he comes today. He can ask for the pay. You didn't say that to me, For said. If you want, I can say the same to you. For actually didn't lack money. After all, Winnip had such a large business. If she needed money, she could just call her mother. Even if she called Chen Zhao, he would give her a blank check. Four and Feilai both had the right to inherit Winnip's wealth. Of course, the sisters didn't seem interested. A caesarean section could also be considered a painless delivery, except for the preparation of analgesic injections. Chen Zhao also prepared normal caesarean equipment and an operating table. Chin, can you tell me who's trying to steal my child? Go ask Feilai. If she's willing to tell you, she'll naturally tell you. Okay. For plan to ask Feilai later. Are the sterilization conditions in place? Even if for trusted Chen Zhao's preparations, disinfection was the most basic requirement. However, this wasn't the isolated operating room in the hospital, so For had to ask. Yes, there's a high-powered air purification converter installed over there. Remember to turn on the air purification converter every time you open the staircase. Our hospital has this equipment too. It's at least 800,000, For said. Did you prepare this for Feilai? Actually, I already have it, Chen Zhao said. Originally, this equipment was prepared in the laboratory in the space crevice. Is there anything else I need to prepare? You'd better give me a list. For had indeed given him many more lists, some of which he hadn't prepared. It wasn't a necessity, but an emergency item. Most of the equipment, tools, and drugs were for Chen Zhao and Blackie's experiments. It was not specially prepared for midwifery, so there were still some shortcomings. Therefore, he had to prepare everything today. He could only go out to prepare. Okula, you actually failed? Mr. Warren, my sister suddenly mastered enhancement magic, and it's a powerful enhancement magic. Okula Singh stood in front of the man with his head lowered. You're really useless, Warren said coldly. At this moment, the jackals around Okula all growled at Warren with their teeth bared. They were all loyal servants of Okula Singh. Okula quickly restrained the jackals. She didn't want to offend Warren. A mere enhancement spell actually defeated you. You disappoint me, Warren said. It seems that I have to do it myself. Okula's expression couldn't help but change. Mr. Warren, please give me another chance. This time, I will definitely get it. I don't have time to waste on you. Warren glanced at Okula coldly. With that, Warren turned around and left, leaving Okula standing on the spot hesitantly. At the moment, Navots and Delamore were shopping. The storm was coming, but as long as it hadn't arrived, people wouldn't stop enjoying life. Merchants wouldn't stop doing business either. On the streets of Beverly Hills, all the luxury stores were still welcoming customers. Both carried big and small bags. That was women's nature. Even though they were both witches, they were more interested in shopping and discussing luxury goods. Suddenly, Navot's body froze. Daly Moore turned around and saw that Navot's body seemed to be frozen. Singh, what's wrong? Navot's Singh's expression turned ugly. What's wrong? There's an enemy. Navot's body was frozen, but her eyes could still move. She stared ahead and finally locked onto a figure, the traitor of the Roma, Warren Jerem. He was different from a family like the Singh family that basically abandoned Roma traditions. Warren Jerem wasn't abandoning Roma traditions. Instead, he was completely going against Roma traditions. He was doing something that was strictly forbidden and taboo. This was similar to one choosing to emigrate and the other choosing to break the law in his own country. It was more or less the same. Of course, what Waylon Jerem did was far worse than breaking the law. Navots chanted a magic incantation. Weakness, mirror image. Dahlia Moore, stab me in the neck with your brooch, Not Singh said. Delamore immediately took off her brooch and stabbed it into Navot's neck. Then Warren Jerem, who was standing opposite her, grabbed his neck. Navot's freezing spell was suddenly lifted. Go, let's go. Navots glanced at Warren Jerem and turned to leave. Are we going home? No. Do you know where Mr. Chin lives? You're going to find Mr. Chun? Why are you looking for him? The person who attacked me just now is very powerful. You and I can't fight him. We can only borrow Mr. Chen's ability. Chapter 1408. Can Mr. Chen's ability fight against him? Mr. Chen has an enhancement ability, and it's very powerful. As long as he uses it properly, he can eliminate most of that person's combat power. Dahlia Moore brought Nawat Singh to Mirror Lake. Navots instantly sensed the spiritual energy in the air. So many elements. It's a spiritualist's paradise. It was Daly Moore's second time here, but the feeling was the same as the first time. She didn't find anything different from other places except for the fresher air. Is it good here? Very good, Nawat Singh said. My family also has an elemental territory, a place for the awakened to train. But the elemental concentration in that place is at least 3 times lower than here, said Nawat Singh. The car stopped in front of the villa. Daly Moore walked to the door with complicated feelings and knocked. Just then, an unfamiliar woman opened the door. Daly Moore didn't know the woman. Could she be Chan Zhao's lover? Is Mr. Chun here? Chin went out. How can I help you? When will he be back? Daly Moore asked. Can I go in and wait for him? For was a bit hesitant. She'd heard that someone wanted to steal Chin Zhao and Feilai's child, so she was quite worried. Now that 2 unfamiliar women had come, she couldn't help but think. I'll call and ask Chin. Of course. Go ahead. for called Chun Zhao right in front of Daly Moore and Navot Singh. "Hey, Chen, there are two ladies at the door. They want to see you," for said. "What are their names?" For looked at Daly Moore. Before she could ask, Daly Moore seemed to know what she wanted to ask. She said first, "I'm Daly Moore. She's Navot Singh." "Let them stay for now and wait for me," Chin Zhao said. When Daly Moore and Navot Singh entered the living room, they saw the pregnant Phalai. "Madam, I'm very sorry about what happened last time." Daly went up to apologize. "It's okay," Phalai replied gently. A while later, Chin Zhao returned. A woman got off the car with him. "Miss Yala, please come in." Shara looked at the mansion. 2 days at most? I can get $200,000. Of course, I promise. Chin Zhao nodded. Shayla was the anesthesiologist found through 4. She was also the best anesthesiologist and anesthetist in Chantilly Hospital. Chun Zhao, on the other hand, was practicing medicine illegally, so he also gave her a very high price, $200,000 for 2 days. Chun Zhao was an illegal doctor himself, so he knew how much it would cost for a legal doctor to practice medicine illegally. Daly Moore and Navot Singh stood up when they saw Chen Zhao come in. "Shara, have a chat with 4. Then take a look at my surgery room. I still have some personal matters to attend to." Shara nodded and walked to 4 and Phalai. "Lady Daly Moore, Miss Knotts, let's have a chat." The 2 girls followed him out of the house. "What can I do for you two?" "Mr. Chen, I'd like to borrow your ability," Knotts said. "Borrow my ability? How?" Chen Zhao asked, confused. "Mirror image," Knotts said. "My spell." "As long as it doesn't affect me, you can borrow it." "I don't mind," Chen Zhao said calmly. "But I'm not sure when I need to borrow it, because I'm not sure when my enemies will appear. You can't have me follow you, right? If that's the case, you might as well let me help you." Chen Zhao rolled his eyes. "Also, I'm busy these 2 days." "Oh, since you're a perception type witch, what level can your perception type magic reach?" "Mr. Chen, what level do you need? There are many types of perception type magic, and I know many of them. I need a perception type ability, like a strategic radar. I can sense the number of enemies within a certain range. This spell isn't difficult. I don't want a one-time perception," Chin Zhao said. "I want it to last at least 5 hours." 5 hours? The first thing Knotts thought of was the Night of Awakening, because it lasted from 8 at night to 1 in the morning. Knotts asked again, "Is there anyone in that room who's going to awaken?" "That's none of your business. Can you do it?" "I can't last that long," Navot said. The spell wasn't difficult, but it was a consumptive spell. It used up a lot of mana. There was no way she could continue to use this spell for hours on end. "I can only use it a dozen times at most. These are mana potions." Chen Zhao tossed the 2 bottles to Navot. The potions were like a drop in the bucket for Chin Zhao. "If there are potions, I can double it." Knotts didn't expect Chin Zhao to be willing to give her such a precious potion. "Tonight?" "No, tomorrow night," Chin Zhao said. "Second night?" Knotts' expression changed. "No, it's too dangerous." "Then forget it. Go ahead," Chin Zhao replied coldly. He didn't force it. Nawat's Hingis and Daly Moore had left. It was mainly Knotts. She felt that it was too risky. The second night was such a terrifying thing. "Singer, are we really just going to stand by and watch?" Daly Moore had wanted to use this to deepen her intimacy with Chan Zhao. "Delamore, it's not that I don't want to watch, but it's really too dangerous. You don't understand what the second night means at all. He's not alone. He has companions like Gaia," Delamore said. "Gaia said that she's confident that she can protect the second night alone. One person can't protect the second night alone. Maybe not alone, but Gaia is still very powerful. I saw it with my own eyes. You're saying that we shouldn't watch. If we help Mr. Chin, he probably won't watch if we're in trouble in the future." Knotts thought deeply for a long time and suddenly stepped on the brakes. Maybe you're right. Chapter 1409. Chun Zhao was a bit surprised that Nawat Singh and Dahlia Moore had returned. Originally, he wasn't angry that they'd left. After all, normal spiritualists would have a hard time dealing with the first night alone. They'd probably piss their pants when they heard that it was the second night. No one had the obligation to sacrifice themselves for someone else. Mr. Chin, we're willing to help you guard the second night. But if the situation deteriorates, we'll still leave. I don't need you to fight, Qin Zhao said. You just need to help me detect the enemies in a large area. Are you sure you don't need me to fight? Navats asked. We can all help you more or less. Using your perception magic will be the greatest help, Qin Zhao said. To Navats, Qin Zhao was still a bit arrogant. Qin Zhao still had something to consider. Should he keep Jerlin at home or send her to the association? Jerlin, are you going to Antigaya? No, Jerlin is staying. Jerlin wants to be the first to see the birth of a little sister. How do you know it's a little sister? Maybe it's a little brother. No, it's a little sister, Jerlin said firmly, as if answering Chun Zhao's question with a predetermined answer. Chun Zhao smiled. Of course. He knew that his second child was also a daughter. Daily Moore, Navats, Shera, For, and Feilai, as well as Chen Zhao, who was carrying Jerlin, sat at various places at the dining table. Qin Zhao was the one who'd cooked tonight. Daily Moore was the first to speak. Mr. Qin, your cooking skills are really good. I need a chef at home. Of course, Daily Moore was only joking, not counting her parents' wealth. Qin Zhao was richer than her. When I lose my job, I'll consider going to your house to be a chef. No one would take a joke seriously. Qin Zhao wasn't someone who couldn't take a joke. I heard that the hurricane that landed on the west coast this time is already faster than the one in 2005, Shera said. Shera said, Mr. Qin, your villa can withstand a hurricane with a speed of over 300 kilometers per hour, right? The surrounding forest can slow down the wind. When this villa was built, it was designed to defend against Category 5 hurricanes. In addition, the upper and lower floors of the villa have two different architectural structures. They can be completely enclosed. That is to say, even if the upper floor of the villa is completely destroyed and submerged by the lake, the lower floor can be completely enclosed. There are enough food reserves and landlines in the lower floor. In addition, there is a passage to Mirror Lake in the second basement. As long as you can hold your breath for a minute, you can safely swim to the outside. Hearing that, Shera felt much more at ease. Moreover, in the face of a hurricane with winds of over 300 kilometers per hour, it might not be safe to stay in the hospital. Compared to China, which had long been accustomed to typhoons and was more experienced in this area, whether it was the country or the state governments, they had never had any experience in preventing hurricanes. Even if they caused catastrophic consequences, they might not take action. The tragedy in 2005 was enough to illustrate all of this. Of the nearly 2,000 people who died, only 1/3 of them were directly killed by the hurricane. The rest were drowned or starved to death because they could not be rescued. Even the crimes that occurred after the disaster were an important reason for the final death toll. As the most developed country in the world with the most perfect system, it had become the most chaotic country in the world in the face of a disaster. A tropical cyclone with a speed of 300 kilometers per hour was something Southeast Asian countries would encounter once or twice every 2 to 3 years. However, countries in North America rarely encountered a tropical cyclone of this intensity. Right now, the rich people on the West Coast had all gone to other cities to seek refuge. No, more accurately, they were not going to seek refuge. They were going on vacation. For rich people, going anywhere was the same. Stephen and Raspa even invited Chen Zhao to go with them, but Chen Zhao clearly could not leave. However, there were still more than 10 hours before the tropical cyclone made landfall. Chen Zhao was not sure if it would continue to grow stronger. The West Coast was in the tropical zone. There was an obvious temperature difference between it and the Pacific Ocean. Tropical cyclones themselves were cyclones produced by convective temperature differences. The larger the temperature difference, the stronger the cyclone. According to past experience, every tropical cyclone that made landfall on the west coast would continue to grow stronger before it made landfall. If it continued to grow stronger, it might become the strongest hurricane in the new century. Everyone was enjoying themselves at the dinner table. However, a piece of news that was broadcasted on the TV cast a shadow over everyone's mood. According to NASA's research, tropical cyclone, which was not a real tropical storm, it was an El Niño phenomenon. The Weather Bureau also issued a red alert at the same time. At the same time, there was a list of all the major cities on the West Coast. They were all red alerts. Los Angeles was in the area with the strongest winds and was about to face the center of the storm. The center of a tropical storm was not as peaceful as in novels. In fact, the closer one was to the center, the stronger the wind. Currently, NASA and the Weather Bureau had announced that the wind at the center of the storm had reached 335 kilometers per hour. It was still getting stronger. No one knew how strong the wind would be when it made landfall. El Niño, which is derived from Spanish, it originally meant Holy Infant. At the beginning of the 19th century, fishermen in Spanish-speaking countries such as Ecuador and Peru in South America discovered that every few years, from October to March of the following year, a warm current would move southward along the coast, raising the temperature of the surface sea significantly. The Peruvian cold current was originally prevalent on the east coast of the Pacific Ocean in South America. The fish that moved with the cold current made the Peruvian fishery one of the 4 largest in the world. However, when this warm current appeared, the fish that liked cold water would die in large numbers, causing the fishermen to suffer a disaster. Because this phenomenon was usually at its peak around Christmas, the helpless fishermen who suffered from natural disasters called it the Son of God, the Holy Infant. El Niño generally occurs once every 4 years, causing immeasurable damage to the world. However, it was uncertain and impossible to calculate. For years was just a calculation based on past experience. In reality, this was not the case. For example, the devastating flood in China in 1998. No one could forget that disaster. That night, the dark clouds over Los Angeles disappeared. It was rare to see the bright stars in the sky. However, everyone knew that this was not a good sign. Please remember the original domain name of this book. Mobile version website. Chapter 1410. That night, Qin Zhao didn't sleep. Instead, he sat on the balcony. During the first half of the night, there were no clouds in the sky, and the stars shone brightly. But in the latter half of the night, the starry sky was once again covered by dark clouds. The wind was blowing. At 6 o'clock in the morning. Qin! Suddenly, he heard Feilai scream in the bedroom. He immediately stood up and returned to the bedroom. Feilai, I'm here. Feilai touched her lower body. It was wet. Chen, my stomach hurts. Feilai said. Chen Zhao immediately turned on the lights and saw that Feilai's face was pale. Chen Zhao couldn't help but feel nervous. Was she going to give birth? What should he do? What should he do now? He couldn't be nervous now, at least not in front of Feilai. First, he had to confirm if Feilai's membranes were broken. The bed was already wet. Yes, the membranes were broken, and the amniotic fluid was coming out. Feilai, I'll call For over immediately. Chen Zhao immediately ran to For's room and called. For, wake up. Feilai's in labor. Bang, bang, bang. Chen Zhao's voice was not soft at all. For wasn't the only one who heard it. Everyone in the villa, including the pets, heard it as well. For ran out of the room in her pajamas and followed Chen Zhao into the bedroom. For immediately went up to check on Feilai. The membrane isn't completely ruptured, For said. I know. Chen Zhao nodded. Send Feilai down first. Chen Zhao tried his best to carry Feilai. Just then, a small figure crept into the room. Daddy, is Mommy going to give little Jerlin a little sister? All right. I don't have to worry about little Jerlin asking me where I came from anymore. Chen Zhao chuckled. Yeah, little Jerlin has to be good today. Little Jerlin has always been obedient. Little Jerlin pouted and said unhappily. Through the elevator, Chen Zhao carried Fei Lai to the surgery room. At this time, Xiaola also got up and rushed to the operating room. Jerlin also came down. Chen Zhao looked at her and scratched his head. Should he kick little Jerlin out? Little Jerlin wasn't even 10 months old yet. Wouldn't it be bad to let her see such a bloody scene? Would it cast a shadow on her future? But just then, Chen Zhao suddenly felt an evil spirit appear in his villa. It was still early in the morning. How could an evil spirit appear at this time? Moreover, it was within the boundaries of his villa. But soon the evil spirit was destroyed. It was Blackie. Shara, I'll leave this to you too, Chen Zhao said with a serious expression. Stared at Chen Zhao with widened eyes. Chen Zhao gave for a look. All right, go. Then looked at Jerlin. What about Jerlin? Let her stay here, Chen Zhao said. Abitos, come down. Abitos moved his huge body and climbed down the stairs. Although Shara had stayed here for a night, it was her first time seeing Abitos. Startled, he looked at Abitos in shock. Abitos, stay here, Chen Zhao ordered. Eat anything that comes in. Yes, Ada. Abitos crawled to a corner on his own and curled up, ignoring Shara's surprised look. On the other hand, was much calmer. She had been here too many times and had seen Abitos before. She had even witnessed Abitos' growth with her own eyes. She had seen Abitos grow from a small lizard into a giant. Also, I have to seal the entrance to prevent the lake water from pouring in and flooding this place. Okay. Nodded. Then Chen Zhao turned and walked out of the basement. What's that? It doesn't eat humans, right? Don't worry, said calmly. I watched Abitos grow up. He's very obedient. It's just a mutated Komodo dragon. In fact, Abitos ate humans. Last March, when Fei Lai and Chen Zhao had gone to Sacramento, they had encountered bandits on the way. Abitos had bitten off a bandit's leg and swallowed it. Of course, wouldn't tell Shara about this in case she panicked. Chen Zhao sealed the basement entrance. By then, Knots and Dalmore had woken up too. After washing up, they saw Chen Zhao sitting in the living room. But they didn't see Blackie sitting across from him. Chen Zhao looked back at the two and said, There's breakfast in the kitchen. There was a whooshing sound outside the window. It was the sound of the forest being blown by the strong wind. Rain slapped against the glass window, making pitter-patter sounds. The wind outside was already very strong. The wind here had been blocked by the surrounding trees, so it was at least halved. If there weren't any trees around, it would be hurricane-level wind. Chen Zhao's pets had all hidden in the forest. They didn't have to worry about being blown away in the forest. Chen Zhao was sitting in the living room, but his small world senses covered the basement, observing Fei Lai's situation. Fei Lai's membranes hadn't completely ruptured. The cervix was still expanding naturally. This was a normal physiological reaction of natural labor. Mr. Chin, Dahlia called out twice, and Chen Zhao stood up suddenly. Huh, you called me? Chen Zhao was already overly nervous. Is Miss Fei Lai in labor? Yes. Chen Zhao nodded. Later, no matter what happens, don't go outside. As long as the mansion is still here, don't run around. If the mansion is destroyed, take the elevator to the second floor to hide. It's still early, right? No, it's late. Chen Zhao shook his head. Suddenly, Dalmore felt that Chen Zhao's aura had changed. It had turned into a red, dangerous aura. Navots also felt Chen Zhao's dangerous aura. Not just Chen Zhao, but they also felt a dark, red, dangerous aura in front of him. Mr. Chen, is there something in front of you? Don't worry, Chen Zhao said calmly. It's harmless and will protect you. Chen Zhao and Blackie's strategy was that Chen Zhao would be in charge of the outside and Blackie would be in charge of the inside. Chen Zhao was responsible for stopping the main force of the evil spirits, but he wasn't confident that he could completely stop the fish that slipped through the net. Now was the time for Blackie to act. Don't say that Blackie was wasting his talents. This was the best arrangement. What Chen Zhao wanted was absolute certainty. He would arrange whatever was the safest. Suddenly, Navat's shingles felt a strong palpitation. Then Navat's legs turned to jelly. She saw a huge black shadow rushing towards them in the air outside the window. Ghost ship. It was a ghost ship. Please remember the original domain name of this book. 9 Heavens, Godly Emperor, mobile version. Chapter 1411. Nawat's Hingis and Dailymore nearly pulled their hair out. So unlucky? A specter ship was actually blown here? Moreover, it was heading straight for the villa. Was there anything more unlucky than this? Chen Zhao looked at the ghost ship and walked out of the door. The moment he opened the door, the wind howled into the living room. Knots and Delamore couldn't stand steadily. Mr. Chen, where are you going? Navat Singh exclaimed. Didn't this guy see the specter ship rushing towards him? Knots rushed to the window and looked at Chen Zhao's figure outside. The bow of the ghost ship was facing them. They couldn't see the length of the ship, but the height of the pole was at least 60 meters. This was an incredible ship, and on the wooden frame of the ship was a statue of the goddess Athena. The ship was in ruins, but the flag on it was very clear. It was a pirate flag with a black background. A naked woman knelt on the ground, and a long sword pierced through the woman's chest. Virgo! Navat Singh exclaimed. Although the rain hit the glass window, making it hard to see clearly, Navat still recognized the origin of the specter ship. One of the top 10 ghost ships, Virgo. Not every specter ship could be recognized. Many specter ships were unknown before they fell silent. But any ghost ship with a name would definitely be famous on the sea, both in the past and present. As for the 10 great specter ships, they had a terrifying reputation. Chen Zhao raised his right arm. This was just the beginning. He didn't want to waste too much time. White light. The ghost ship was instantly enveloped by the white light. Then, not even scraps were left. Everything turned to dust. Knott's face was filled with disbelief. What had just happened? What was that white light? She couldn't understand what had happened in that instant. Chen Zhao's small world sensed to see if there were any survivors. There weren't any. Only then did Chen Zhao return to the living room. Now, Navat looked at Chen Zhao in a different way. Virgo. Destroyed? The famous Virgo was destroyed just like that? That was the specter ship. It was the famous Virgo. Furthermore, there was no thrilling battle. In an instant, everything was over. Mr. Chen, that was ghost ship, right? How did you do it? Chen Zhao glanced at Navat. I think you got something wrong. We're not facing the second night, but the third. The awakened one is my unborn daughter. So, while it's still early and the wind hasn't reached its peak, you still have a chance to escape. Not Singh and Delamore were both shocked. The third night? Were they about to face the third night? Dahlia was still all right, because she didn't have an accurate idea of how terrifying the third night was. But Navat's Hingis knew. She knew how terrible it was. That would be a disaster. Mr. Chen, are you kidding me? Now that my family is in the basement, do you think I would joke around? Navat was trembling, slightly. Mr. Chen, do you not understand the meaning of the third night? I know, Chen Zhao said calmly. But now my family is facing the third night. Navat's Hingis looked at Dahlia. Dahlia, you go first. I'll stay. Mr. Chen, I'll stay here for now, but if I think it's necessary, I'll leave too. I'll stay too, Dahlia said. Thank you. Chen Zhao nodded. I'll still say the same thing. If you stay in the mansion, you won't be harmed. Navat didn't have much confidence in Chen Zhao's promise. After all, this was the third night. Plus, It didn't seem like a normal third night. Chun Zhao sat back down on the sofa and continued observing the basement. Fei Lai's labor seemed to be slower than a normal natural labor. Thankfully, Fei Lai was healthy and strong, so as long as there were no major problems, it was acceptable even if it took longer. Chun Zhao didn't care if it was natural, cesarean, or painless labor. As long as Fei Lai was safe, as long as the child was safe, nothing else mattered. After getting rid of the Spectre ship, the attacks seemed to stop. In the next hour or so, there was still no movement. Nevertheless, Chun Zhao remained tense. At 9:40 in the morning, the TV broadcasted an emergency announcement again. The wind at the center of the storm reached 368 kilometers per hour. This was a terrifying number. It might even be the most powerful tropical storm in 100 years. 20-meter-tall waves rose along the coastline. The coastline was completely locked down. At the same time, the weather station also suggested that residents living in the suburbs should hide in their basements and prepare for waterproofing. Every TV station was broadcasting the news of the tropical storm. Some anchors even claimed that this would be the toughest test in American history. Just then, Chun Zhao stood up again. Navats Hingis and Dahlia both looked at him uneasily. It wasn't just because of the third night, but also because of this unprecedented storm. Of course, so far, they had not linked the two events together. But Chun Zhao felt that they were the same event. "Mr. Chen, are there more enemies?" "Yes." Chun Zhao nodded. Navats Hingis was a bit surprised. Chun Zhao's senses were stronger than she'd imagined. Of course, Chun Zhao's maximum range was 30 meters, which was the range of his mini-world. On the other hand, if Navats used perception offense, it might not be as clear as Chun Zhao within 30 meters, but it would be more accurate beyond 30 meters. Navats used his super area of effect perception. In an instant, an image flashed in his mind. Hundreds of evil spirits appeared within a few hundred meters in front of him. How was this possible? It wasn't even 10 in the morning. How could there be a large-scale attack of evil spirits? She'd thought that the ghost ship had been blown over by the wind. They were just unlucky. But now, these hundreds of evil spirits couldn't have been blown over by the wind too, right? This was too unusual. It didn't fit the pattern of the night of awakening. Also, why were there so many evil spirits at this time? Could Chun Zhao deal with them alone? Should she go out and help? "Dahlia, stay here. I'll go out for a bit." Navats finally decided to go out and see if she could help. Please remember this book's domain name, 9 Heavens Divine Emperor Mobile Version. Chapter 1412. However, Navats regretted it as soon as she stepped out. She'd underestimated the wind outside. When she reached the front yard, she almost lost her balance. Fortunately, there was a pillar supporting the awning, and Navats grabbed onto it. Of course, the canopy had already been blown away. Only the pillar was left standing there. But even with the support of the pillar, Navats still felt it was difficult. She couldn't even help Chun Zhao fight. However, Chun Zhao seemed to not feel the wind at all. He just stood there. The hundreds and thousands of evil spirits flew over from above Mirror Lake. It was truly terrifying. They were so dense that they were like an army charging over. They gave off a chaotic, disorderly, and manic aura. This aura gathered above their heads and accompanied them as they advanced. At the same time, it made them stronger and scarier. In Navats' eyes, these hundreds of evil spirits were the scariest part of the third night. But reality wasn't like that. It was daytime now, and this was only the prelude. Judging from the trend of getting weaker and stronger, Navats didn't know what kind of attack she would face later on. The beginning was already so scary. What kind of attack would there be later? Could the few of them really defend against such an attack? "Why did you come out?" Chun Zhao turned his head and looked at Navats. I came out to help you." "Go in. I don't need your help here. Be careful." Navats Singh suddenly shouted. A evil spirit waved its arms and grabbed at Qin Zhao. Qin Zhao raised his arm and grabbed the evil spirit. The evil spirit struggled in his hand, but it couldn't break free. Eye of the lightning, attract lightning. Boom, 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 bolts of lightning descended from the sky and landed on Qin Zhao's right arm. Nawat Singles was shocked to the core. Looking at Qin Zhao's unmoving body, she wondered if the lightning was attracted by Qin Zhao. He said he knew some elemental magic. Was it thunder magic? And this was called only a little. The evil spirit in Qin Zhao's right hand had already turned to ashes under the lightning. Qin Zhao's right arm also gathered a large amount of lightning. The mouth of Gluttony spat out an electric arc. The terrifying electric arc broke through the wind and rain and swept across the sky above Mirror Lake, remaining in the air for more than 10 seconds. In less than 10 seconds, hundreds of evil spirits had been wiped out. In the storm, Qin Zhao was invincible. The harsher the weather, the more lightning Qin Zhao could absorb. Of course, he could convert more of it into magic power. Nawat's face was filled with shock. Was this what Qin Zhao had said in the past? Knowing some elemental magic? This was a powerful magic that she had never heard of or seen before. He said he majored in strengthening. It was obviously a lie. Looks like it'll stop for a while. Qin Zhao glanced at the storm and turned to bring Nawat Singh into the house. Mr. Qin, it seems like there's no point for me to stay here. Put on this headset, Qin Zhao said. If you notice any stragglers while I'm busy fighting, inform me immediately. Qin Zhao had never planned on letting Nawat and Delimore help him fight. They only stayed here to ensure that nothing would go wrong. In less than 10 minutes, Nawat said, there's another wave of evil spirits attacking. Some of them are very, very scary. Nawat looked at Qin Zhao worriedly. Could Qin Zhao really deal with such frequent attacks by himself? Qin Zhao walked out again. A few minutes later, he returned to the house. Mr. Qin, it's done? No, those evil spirits are still here, Nawat asked in confusion, looking up at Qin Zhao, who'd just entered the room. I'll use my clone to deal with them, Qin Zhao said. Nawat realized that the evil spirits were indeed disappearing quickly. Clone magic? Qin Zhao had said last time that he indeed knew clone magic, but Nawat hadn't thought much of it at the time. After all, most clone magic was passed down through bloodlines. At least, Nawat hadn't seen any powerful clone spiritualists. However, Qin Zhao's clone was actually able to fight against so many evil spirits, including some powerful ones. Those powerful evil spirits couldn't be compared to regular evil spirits or spiritual bodies. Before they arrived, they'd been devouring each other. Some would become even more violent and chaotic. Their strength was 10 to dozens of times stronger than ordinary evil spirits. Nawat could only sense the existence of the evil spirits and the strength of their auras. But when she stood before the floor-to-ceiling window and looked outside, she could see Qin Zhao's 12 clones. Every one of them was extremely powerful. Even the evil spirit, which Nawat thought was extremely powerful, could only take one strike from Qin Zhao's clone. Nawat was amazed. Not only was Qin Zhao's elemental magic powerful, but his clone magic was also powerful. She saw with her own eyes that one of Qin Zhao's clones ripped apart a 10-meter-long evil spirit with its bare hands. If it were him, the biggest possibility was that he would flee in defeat. Nawat thought back to 2 days ago. She'd even used the tone of a senior to teach Qin Zhao how to use magic and fight. At the thought, Nawat Shingles felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. It was like a kindergarten teacher telling a Chinese Academy of Sciences doctor how to study. And the battle lasted much longer than what Nawat expected. Before the first wave was destroyed, the second wave came. Qin Zhao had 12 clones, but they didn't know magic. Now, to Qin Zhao, The 12 clones' greatest use was no longer to fight separately. Instead, they combined into one. Or it could be a battle that didn't have much strength and lasted a long time. He'd let the 12 clones fight. Navots had thought that Chun Zhao's clones wouldn't be able to last long. But reality wasn't like that. Chun Zhao's clones were extremely strong and could last for a long time. In fact, as long as Chun Zhao's clones weren't destroyed or taken back, they would always exist. An evil spirit escaped, Navot said. It's coming from the right side of the villa. Suddenly, the red ball of dangerous aura in the living room disappeared. In just 3 seconds, the evil spirit disappeared too. Navots was shocked. It wasn't a dangerous aura. It was a despairing aura. Please remember this book's domain name. 9 Heavens, Godly Emperor Mobile Version. Chapter 1413. Navots felt chills run down her spine. It was a very bad feeling. The dangerous aura that had been lingering in the living room returned. But when it returned, it had turned black. Black was a color she had never seen before. Even her elders had never told her what black represented. This kind of perception spell only had 2 colors, red and green. They represented the level of danger. But what did black represent? She had never heard of it or even seen it before. Was this another spell from Chun Zhao? But what spell was it exactly? Chun Zhao didn't pay attention to Navot's and Delamore's expressions. He was more concerned about Fei Lai's situation in the basement. Fei Lai had already been in labor for almost 5 hours, and it was still going on. Chun Zhao completely ignored the battle outside the house. If there was a battle above, the basement was also a battlefield. Mom, go. Mom, go. Jerlin cheered Fei Lai on. This was probably the first time Chun Zhao couldn't participate in a battle himself. Fei Lai had to face it alone. Chun Zhao kept looking at the time. Time passed by minute, when the hand of the clock pointed at 12. Wah! Wah! With a cry, Chun Zhao's second child was finally born. Just then, the storm seemed to grow stronger. Chun Zhao could hear creaking sounds coming from the mansion. This was the prelude to the structure of the mansion disintegrating. Mr. Chun, the house seems to be destroyed. Delamore's expression suddenly turned ugly. If she and Navot Singh were exposed to the storm, they would die for sure. The number of evil spirits has increased. Navots turned to look at Chun Zhao. Chun Zhao finally turned his attention back to the battlefield. Navots and Delamore realized that a black and red liquid had appeared under their feet. Ah, what is this? Immediately, the storm started destroying the mansion. This was an irreversible process. Even Chun Zhao couldn't avoid it. If it was just a storm, Chun Zhao could still protect the mansion with the dark lava. But it wasn't just a storm now. Chun Zhao summoned Bostier and the 2 Dark Mothers. Not Singh and Delamore were startled once more. They thought it was some evil magical creature. The 2 of them gasped in amazement when they saw Bustil's enormous body. The moment Bustil appeared, his huge body tore down the villa. Its body was much bigger than the villa. The living room was small, and it couldn't accommodate Bustil's huge body at all. But Bustil stood in front of Navots and Delamore, shielding them from the storm. "These 3 are my servants," Chun Zhao said. "They will protect you." The 2 women sucked in a breath of cold air again. Such a powerful creature was actually his servant. Did he summon it? Nawat's Shingles realized that Chun Zhao had another powerful series of spells. Even if Bustil didn't do anything and just stood there, wouldn't it be scary enough? This huge body almost completely blocked the storm. The 2 darkness matriarchs followed them calmly. This man was unbelievably powerful. Chun Zhao stood at the front and looked at the battlefield. The 12 clones immediately retreated to Chun Zhao's side. Dark lava enveloped them, all in one. The 12 clones and Chun Zhao merged into one. Chun Zhao hadn't used all in one for a month, but now he was full of fighting spirit. This battle wasn't for benefits or for others. Everything about him was beneath it. Narvak Singh and Delamore were confused. Why did Qin Zhao remove the clone spell? Weren't the 12 clones very effective at blocking most of the evil spirits? Was it because it was too draining? That made sense. The clones had been fighting intensely for a few hours already. It must have used a lot of magic power. However, such a large amount of magic power was consumed. Qin Zhao summoned the 3 magical creatures to protect the 2 women. Would he still have the strength to continue fighting? Nawat Singh and Delamore were both worried. Nawat's already realized that this wasn't an ordinary third night. She'd never heard of a third night starting on the 3rd morning. Qin Zhao wasn't surprised. Including this time, Qin Zhao had experienced the 3rd night 3 times. All 3 times were different. The first time, Blackie had finished it all by himself. The second time was different. That night, the Evil Spirit Society had attacked Norma. Plus, the Evil Spirit Society had attached themselves to the bodies of many gang members. It was much stronger than the first time. Today's intensity was also much stronger than the previous 2 times. Perhaps everyone's 3rd night would be different. Nawat Shingles saw the sky full of evil spirits coming for them. It's over! The number of evil spirits was like a tidal wave, following the momentum of a storm. Could Qin Zhao stop so many evil spirits? Suddenly, there was a splash in Mirror Lake. A huge mouth opened and sucked in hundreds of evil spirits. Not Singh and Delamore's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. What was that? What had just come out of the water? Qin Zhao waved his arms and summoned 1,000 swords. The next moment, 1,000 stone swords appeared around Qin Zhao. This scene shocked Nawat Singh and Delamore once again. They'd never seen such a shocking scene before. 1,000 stone swords broke through the air with cyclones. Was this the battle of the 3rd night? This scene was like a myth. Nawat was speechless. How many evil spirits and dead souls had been blown over by this storm? In Nawat's and Delamore's eyes, each of Qin Zhao's spells was so shocking. Suddenly, a black shadow appeared above everyone's heads. Nawat suddenly felt a threat from above. Ghost ship! It was a ghost ship that was falling headfirst. Mr. Qin, above, above! But it was too late. The ghost ship had come too suddenly and fallen too fast. Qin Zhao couldn't dodge at all. Nawat and Delamore both cried out in shock. They saw the evil spirit crew on the ghost ship bearing their fangs and claws. They were as crazy and unrestrained as they were when they were alive. They waved their rotten swords and let out evil and crazy howls. Qin Zhao lifted his head. He hadn't planned on running. There was no point in running away in this war. Please remember this book's domain name, 9 Heavens Godly Emperor Mobile Version. Chapter 1414. There was only one solution. Kill all the attackers. Qin Zhao raised his fist and smashed it against the bow of the ghost ship that was falling down. Nawat's Shingles and Delamore's eyes widened. What did they just see? They saw a human, a body of flesh and blood, shattering a ghost ship with a single punch. The hundreds of evil souls on the Spectre ship were also blown to smithereens. They'd been crazy pirates when they were alive. Now that they were dead, they were even crazier and scarier. But Qin Zhao only punched them. Qin Zhao retracted his fist, as if it was just a small thing. They never knew that ghost ships were so easy to deal with. In the past, if they discovered a rampaging ghost ship, they would usually need to gather and fight. No matter what the result was, they would need to pay a huge price. But to Qin Zhao, ghost ships seemed to be just a matter of one punch. Just then, a wave surged over from the end of Mirror Lake. A red wave. As the storm swept over, the red wave surged more and more violently. Tide of death! Knots shouted, Mr. Qin, that's the tide of death. Be careful. Qin Zhao looked at the red wave. There were countless howling souls in the wave. They were fighting to be the first to rush toward the mansion. They'd already formed a wave more than 10 meters tall. There wasn't just one wave either. There were two more tides of death behind it. Amon attacked again. He leaped from the side and flapped his huge wings, increasing his height. He flapped again and went higher. When he was 100 meters in the air, Amon suddenly fell head first. With an unparalleled impact, he plummeted to the ground. Not Singh and Delamore had never seen such a shocking battle before. This battlefield, had long since surpassed their understanding. Boom! The moment Amon landed, the force was also dispersed. Amon already weighed 1,000 tons. Falling from a height of 100 meters, one could imagine how powerful the impact would be. Even the three tides of death were wiped out by the impact caused by Amon. This battle also toppled their worldview. It turned out that spiritualists could really be like those in myths and legends. An absurd thought even appeared in Naught's mind. Who was stronger between this man and the 5 Pillar Kings in the Romani mythology? Watts recalled the mirror image of weakness she had used on Qin Zhao last time. At the time, she was already shocked. She thought that was Qin Zhao's strongest power. At the time, she'd naively thought that she'd made a mistake and used her mirror image ability to copy Qin Zhao's strongest power. But now, it seemed that he was too naive. Singh, I sense a huge presence approaching from the front. Did I sense it wrongly? Look. Dalamore's words interrupted Navot's, Singh's thoughts. Navot's quickly activated his range perception. Indeed, there was a terrifying presence approaching from the front. Mr. Chen, be careful. There's a huge evil aura ahead. In fact, Qin Zhao had already sensed it. Not only did he sense it, but he also saw it. It was a fleet of modern warships. That's right, it was a modern warship fleet. The fleet consisted of more than 10 warships of various models and functions, and they were flying in the air. What a ridiculous thing. A fleet was flying in the sky. This wasn't science fiction. It was a super magical plot. They were all death fleets formed by warships that had sunk in the Pacific Ocean. They didn't wander or gather. Fortunately, they didn't wander. Otherwise, the entire Pacific Ocean would become a forbidden zone. But this time, they'd gathered because of the power of the third night. In the wind and rain, the enormous figure of the flagship could be vaguely seen. They came with death. They were a true disaster. Boom! In the wind and rain, a ball of green fire flashed. Boom! A ball of intense green death flames exploded in front of Qin Zhao. Navat, Singh exclaimed. She and Daly-Moore had thought that Qin Zhao would be strong enough to face all this. But who would have thought that the arrival of the death fleet would turn the situation around? The explosion was a combination of death flames and modern weapons. Flesh and blood couldn't resist it at all. Any creature that was hit head-on by this weapon would only end up as ashes and smoke. Navat Singh and Daly-Moore both thought that Qin Zhao couldn't possibly escape. However, the green flames dissipated faster than expected. Qin Zhao stood where he was, unharmed. But the Death Fleet's attack didn't stop there. More than a dozen ghost warships fired hundreds of cannons at the same time. These ghost warships spanned from the 20s to the 60s and 70s. The dark magma immediately formed a black screen, blocking the Death Fleet's first salvo. They couldn't let the ghost warships continue attacking. Even if Qin Zhao could handle it, not Singh and Delamore couldn't. Qin Zhao finally moved. This was the first time he'd moved his feet. Behind him, Navat Singh and Daly-Moore saw Qin Zhao shoot out like an arrow. Reverse storm shot toward the Death Fleet. Because of the storm, the visibility was too low. They couldn't see the battle between Qin Zhao and the Death Fleet clearly. But soon, the flagship at the front suddenly fell. Then Amon swam over. He opened his mouth and absorbed the falling ghost warships. It didn't take long for the Spectre battleship to disappear. They weren't real. They were essentially the same as the ancient ghost ships. Soon, the second ghost warship fell, then the third and the fourth. In Qin Zhao's eyes, the Death Fleet's biggest threat was their long-range attacks. Once Chen Zhao got close, the threat was no different from a regular ghost ship. In a short 10 minutes, more than a dozen ghost warships all fell. Amon had already devoured the death aura of the entire Death Fleet. Right now, Amon had turned into a 100-meter-tall beast. He spread his wings and soared in the air. Chen Zhao heaved a sigh of relief. Thankfully, there weren't any new warships or short-range missiles. Otherwise, Chen Zhao would be in big trouble. This was a great fortune in misfortune. There were too many unclean and filthy things that had been blown over by this storm. Amon also started showing signs of mutation after devouring large amounts of death aura. More accurately, he was showing his true form. Amon was extremely close to his original form. Nawat Singh and Daly Moore were stunned by Amon's majestic appearance. There was actually such a magical creature in the world. Chapter 14:15. Amon opened his mouth, and a green beam of light shot out. The green beam was similar to the Death Fleet's cannons, but Amon shot further, and his breath was heavier. The green beam shot more than 10 kilometers away and then exploded into a ball of green flames. He seemed to have hit something. Knotts and Delamore could only vaguely see the faint green light, but they didn't know what it was. But soon they saw what it was. It was a baby, at least from the overall appearance. It was indeed a baby, but the baby was a bit too big. A 40-meter-long baby was obviously not born to a human. Its skin wasn't tender and fragile like a newborn's. Instead, it was dark and cracked. Chen Zhao descended from the sky and pressed down on the giant baby's head. In an instant, the giant baby's body collapsed and countless evil spirits escaped from the giant baby's body. The giant baby was formed by countless evil spirits. Lightning. Chen Zhao drew down a bolt of lightning. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of evil spirits were turned into ashes by the lightning. Chen Zhao suddenly had an idea. If he could summon the devil army from the association, then he could use Thunderstorm at Mirror Lake. That way, he wouldn't have to keep running around to fix his mistakes. Chen Zhao took out his phone, but there was no signal. There was no signal. Chen Zhao was so angry that he almost smashed his phone. After this was over, he had to change to another operator. Damn it. He had no choice. For his family, he had to continue fighting. Although this battle had already exceeded the normal third night, it was still not enough. But the strongest ones were only at the Death Fleet's level. They couldn't create something that went against nature. But to Daly Moore and Nawat Singh, this battle was thrilling. It wasn't something they could interfere with at all. Chen Zhao worked harder and harder. Every evil spirit was torn apart by him. I haven't even hugged my baby since it was born. My whole family is still in the basement. My house was torn down, although I did it on my own initiative. You asterisk souls, you're still here to cause trouble. The more depressed Chen Zhao was, the harder he attacked. Chen Zhao wasn't happy. Everyone in the basement wasn't happy either. Feilai, is Chin okay? For hug the baby. When the baby was born, it cried for a while. Then, Feilai fed it some milk and it fell asleep. Feilai was wrapped in a blanket. She sat next to Abidos with Fal and Shala. Abidos wasn't really a cold-blooded animal. His body was very warm, just enough to provide heat for the three of them. After Shayla overcame her initial fear, she was no longer afraid. Little Jerlin, on the other hand, kept poking her head over to look at the wrapped baby. Mommy, the baby is so small. Mommy, can I hold the baby? Feilai smiled bitterly. Little Jerlin couldn't be carried now. Boom, boom. A violent tremor came from the ceiling. However, the ceiling was still quite sturdy. There were only tremors, but no signs of collapse and no water seepage. There won't be a world war outside, right? Shayla asked. It's okay. Chen's up there. How long do we have to hide here? I don't know. Chen will inform us once the problem is solved. Are you sure nothing will happen to Chen? Fal wasn't very sure. Of course not. Daddy's super powerful. He'll kill all the bad guys. Oh, Feilai, you haven't named the baby yet, Fal said. How about we give this pretty girl a name now? Let's wait for Chin, Feilai said. Don't wait for him. You gave birth to the baby, so you have the right to name it. I still want to discuss with Chun before deciding. Mommy, isn't the baby a name? Jerlin asked, tilting her head. Feilai, Fal, and Shayla were all speechless. I suddenly realized a very, very serious problem. Fal suddenly became serious. What problem? Chin has considered all the problems except one. For's expression darkened. Tell me, what problem? Toilet. How to solve it? You need to go to the toilet? Fal nodded gravely. Big or small? Big, Fal said, covering her eyes. Feilai and Shayla's expressions also became unnatural. If he did it in an enclosed space, it would turn the enclosed space into hell. Feilai thought for a long time. Help me up. What are you going to do? Do you want to pee too? Feilai rolled her eyes. She had only eaten a little in the past 2 days. Most of the rest was nutrient fluid. Feilai went to the entrance of the second basement and turned on the switch. Then she looked down. There was no light source on the second basement, only a small one at the entrance. Feilai looked down. It seemed that the three-headed dog was not down there. Go down and solve it. Is there something down there? Fal saw Feilai's action. Nothing. Even if there is, you don't have to be afraid, Feilai said calmly. Speak clearly. What's down there? You saw it too. There's nothing down there. Although Feilai had made a solemn promise, For was still a little worried. However, she could not afford to waste any more time. She handed the baby to Feilai and jogged down the stairs. The second basement was very dark. There was also a huge water trough that led to Mirror Lake. Because of the storm outside, large amounts of water kept pouring into the trough. Thankfully, the design of the water trough was special. The lake water would not completely pour in, for had a feeling that the second floor of the basement gave her a terrifying feeling. After the mansion was built, she knew that it was a second basement. Feilai had said that it was used for storage, but there was nothing here now. Also, what was the opening in the water trough for? She had no idea what Feilai and Qin Zhao were thinking. A few minutes later, Fal hurriedly finished and ran back up. Feilai sealed the passageway. Her actions made For suspicious again. The first basement had originally been a lounge. Although it had been modified into a surgery room, many functions were still preserved. At least, they did not have to worry about starving or freezing here. Fal and Shayla both suspected that Chun Zhao and Feilai had built the basement so well to deal with a storm like this. It was indeed a good place to hide. Please remember this book's domain name, 9 Heavens Godly Emperor Mobile Version. Chapter 1416. Midnight. The wind began to weaken, and the evil spirit's attack frequency also decreased. Occasionally, 1 or 2 troublesome evil spirits would run out, but they were no longer a threat. It started in the morning and continued until now. Chun Zhao had never wanted to hug his second child as much as he did now. Gradually, the wind stopped, but the rain continued. Mr. Chen, it's 1 in the morning. Knots and Daryl Moore had been standing for a while. They couldn't stand anymore and had been sitting on the ground since nightfall. Of course, they still found a few planks to cushion their butts. Chun Zhao could finally relax. But he didn't completely relax. After all, his second daughter's 3rd night had started very strangely. Who knew if it would end normally? Qin Zhao rubbed his hands. He could finally open the entrance to the basement. He opened the entrance to the basement. At the moment, Shara was asleep on the sofa. Feilai and For were each hugging a child. But Feilai seemed to sense something. She opened her eyes and saw Qin Zhao. Chen. Yes. Chen Zhao walked up and looked at the baby in Feilai's arms. He hugged her gently. Thank you. You too, Feilai replied. At the same time, she handed the baby to Qin Zhao. Do you want a hug? Yes. Chen Zhao gently picked up his second child. The little girl was slightly red. She put her little finger in her mouth and sucked. Chen Zhao didn't dare to use any strength at all. It was like the first time he'd hugged Jerlin. He was afraid that he would hurt the magical little life in his arms if he used any strength. But Chen Zhao also wanted to toss the little girl in his arms. This feeling was really special. Fei Lai, what should we call our child? Just then, Blackie floated over and looked at the baby in Chen Zhao's arms. Chen Zhao, I want to be her godfather. Is that okay? Chen Zhao nodded. Blackie had never made a request. This was the only time he'd made one. Chen Zhao wouldn't reject it. He couldn't. Blackie couldn't help but reach out his black and dry palm. His finger gently touched the baby's face. But very soon, Blackie retracted it in fear. It was as if he was afraid of defiling a baby. Dad. Just then, Jerlin felt Chen Zhao. She immediately opened her eyes and called out loudly. Little Jerlin's cry woke Shala and for up. Chen, why did you come down? Is it over? Yes, Chen Zhao said. The wind has stopped, but it's still raining. Miss Navots, Miss Dalymore, please rest in the RV. Chen Zhao sent the two girls to the underground garage. Thankfully, the garage was underground. Otherwise, their losses would be huge. Putting aside the two trucks that were usually used to import goods, the value of the two Porsches and the RV was as high as $7 million. Even if the house was destroyed, it was less than $2 million. As long as his family was safe, this loss was worth it. Chen Zhao carried little Jerlin, while Fei Lai carried her sister. Little Jerlin, aren't you tired? I'm not sleepy. Jerlin blinked and looked at Chen Zhao. Dad, Mom, do you want to rest? Jerlin has to look after the baby for Mom and Dad. Dad, Mom, can you let the baby sleep with Jerlin in the future? Jerlin will definitely take good care of the baby. Chen Zhao smiled. It was impossible to sleep together. Chen Zhao planned for his second daughter to sleep separately after the first few days, just like how Jerlin had done before. Jerlin was actually very tired too. She had been playing with the baby the entire day and hadn't been idle at all. She was even more attentive to the baby than Fei Lai. Soon, she fell asleep on the sofa. The next day, Chen Zhao and Fei Lai were woken up by Jerlin. Jerlin had woken up at some point and was mumbling in front of the cradle. When Shala and Four walked out of the basement and saw the flattened mansion, they were both shocked. Luckily, they had hidden in the basement yesterday. Otherwise, it was hard to imagine what would have happened. Then Four and Shala left. Navots and Dalymore prepared to leave too. Mr. Chin, I have an empty mansion. Do you want to borrow it? Dalymore only wanted to build a good relationship with Chen Zhao now. Yesterday, Chen Zhao had shocked her and Navots too much. Chen Zhao tactfully rejected Dalymore's suggestion. Chen Zhao had his own plans. The beach mansion would be completed in about a month. Before that, his family planned to stay at the association for a while. After the two left, Chen Zhao and Fei Lai also started packing, preparing to go to the association. Of course, their house had been blown away. What could they pack? They just had to gather all the pets and go to the headquarters together. Just then, Chen Zhao's phone rang. It was Denver. The brewery seemed to have suffered some damage due to the storm and had to stop production for a few days. Denver was currently in Denver preparing for the beer festival, so he couldn't come back for now. He could only leave it to the higher-ups in the factory. Chen Zhao understood. With the strength of the storm yesterday, they were lucky that the factory hadn't been blown away. Of course, this was also related to Felwood's dedication. After all, this was a project Chen Zhao had commissioned. Felwood was practically supervising the entire process. Any small quality problem would make him angry. Chen Zhao didn't call the association. He didn't know if the association had been greatly affected by the storm. Driving the RV to the association, Chen Zhao saw the collapsed outer walls. The iron gate had also been blown down. The headquarters wasn't damaged, though. Chen Zhao was very satisfied. Seeing Chen Zhao's car, the people from the association immediately ran out. But when they saw the swaddle in Fei Lai's arms and her deflated stomach, everyone cried out in shock. Wow, Miss Fei Lai, Who's the baby in your arms? Miss Phelan, you gave birth already? When did it happen? The chatter of the people nearby immediately woke up the sleeping baby. Wah! As soon as the baby woke up, he started crying. Shocked, everyone looked at Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao and little Jerlin, who was in Chen Zhao's arms, were looking at the crowd with murderous intent. Okay, go in. Chen Zhao waved his hand. Just then, Gaia walked out too. Chen Phelan, Gaia also came for the baby. Congratulations. Thank you. Have you named it? Chapter 14:17. Chen Zhao and Phelan glanced at each other. Not yet. Do you have an alternative name? There are a few that we can't decide on. Then everyone huddled together and started talking, giving Chen Zhao and Phelan suggestions. Even Jerlin was no exception. Dad, Mom, what do you think of Little Angel? Angel is too common. Actually, both Chen Zhao and Phelan had thought of this name. Most parents had thought of this name. Little Jerlin still thinks Little Angel is very good, Little Jerlin said unhappily with puffed cheeks. Kevin, what about Kevin? Gaia asked. Kevin represented wisdom and beauty. No, Little Angel is better, Jerlin said. Nana, what about Nana? West asked. Nana was the name of the Babylonian goddess of light. Angeli, I think the president's daughter should be named like this, the heroic spear-wielding empress. Then we should call her Juno, Klaus said. It means diva. Clova is better. Harold said, I still think Little Angel is better. Everyone felt that their name for the baby was better than the others. Then why don't we write everyone's name on the sign and let them choose? Phelan asked hesitantly. Then why don't we write our name on the sign and let them choose? Everyone's names were not bad. This made it even harder for the two to choose. Chen Zhao also agreed, but the baby couldn't even crawl. How could she choose a name? More importantly, she was still sleeping. After thinking for a while, they decided to use darts to shoot at the target. Whatever they hit would count. Chen Zhao grabbed the baby's arm and threw the dart at the wheel. Whoosh, the dart hit the wheel. Everyone looked at it immediately. Larissa, meaning fortress. Who gave this name? Chen Zhao asked curiously. It was a nice name with a good meaning. Okay, it's decided. Larissa it is. Dad, can't we change it? Isn't little Angela good? Jerlin looked at Chen Zhao with tears in her eyes. Other than this, I'll agree to anything you want. Really? Yes, really. Okay, I want to share a room with little Larissa. Chen Zhao's mind raced. Jerlin still hadn't given up on the idea. I feel a little dizzy. I need to rest for a while. Daddy, don't go. You haven't promised. Little Jerlin, seeing that Chen Zhao had escaped, Jerlin immediately turned to look at Phelan. Well, Mr. Fellwood, are you all right? God bless me, I'm fine. Has the project by the sea been affected? Many of the trees we planted were blown down, but the building itself is undamaged. Some of the temporary structures were blown down too. The construction period might be delayed for a few days, Fellwood said honestly. Well, after the seaside project is completed, go to Mirror Lake and help me rebuild the villa. Mr. Chen, Mirror Lake Mansion has been destroyed? Yes, but it's not because of your quality. It's mainly because I accidentally demolished the house. Fellwood was speechless. Was there such a thing as an accident when demolishing a house? That day, Chen Zhao took some time to go to Moon Beach. Apart from the beach, Chen Zhao also named his new home Moon Villa. Moon Villa's project was 80% complete. Now it was being renovated. At the same time, there were trees blown down by the storm. These trees had been planted not long ago. They weren't even rooted in. It was already lucky that they weren't blown away by the storm with a speed of more than 300 kilometers per hour. Moon Villa was a bit messy after the storm, but it was starting to show its grand form. The bright Moon Villa wasn't very big, but it was built on a cliff and it was inlaid. A part of the rock layer at the top of the cliff had been dug out. This was the most difficult part of the project. This part of the rock layer could only be excavated manually. Explosives couldn't be used. Explosives would destroy the entire rock layer. The elevator shaft from the top of the cliff to the beach was also dug through with a drill. The project was very difficult. Now the beach had been cleaned. The gravel had been cleared, and thousands of tons of fine sand had been brought over. A few thousand tons of fine sand sounded like a lot, but it was barely enough to cover a dozen kilometers of coastline. Also, because of the erosion of the sea, more sand had to be added every month to maintain the quality of the beach. Because of the storm, a lot of trash had been washed ashore. Now, many workers were cleaning the trash on the beach. On the other side of Moon Beach was Sandro National Park. It was surrounded by green mountains and had a great geographical environment. Chen Zhao had considered buying this place because of its good environment. Mr. Chin, I'll replant the trees on the cliff, but I checked the weather forecast. It seems like there'll be another storm in the next month. I'm afraid that the trees will be blown down again. Felwood Cisco had a headache. He tried his best, but some things couldn't be changed. The trees hadn't been planted for long and couldn't take root too deeply. No one could change this. It's okay, Qin Zhao said. You just have to straighten the trees. I'll think of something then. Chen Zhao had already planned to move Eugenus here. Compared to the medium-sized forest at Mirror Lake, Eugenus could be more effective here. There was a larger forest here. Although Sandro National Park didn't belong to Chen Zhao, it didn't belong to anyone either. But since it didn't belong to anyone, the area that Eugenus could control was larger. Eugenus could make the trees grow quickly in a short time. For example, the forest around Mirror Lake. Because of Eugenus' control, it could withstand the storm. Not a single tree fell. The main building of Moon Villa was like an egg. Of course, calling it an egg would be too ugly. As the designer, Felwood Cisco felt that it was a gem. The arc-shaped structure could withstand the wind blowing from all directions. For example, the main building of Moon Villa was undamaged in the tropical storm which... Mr. Felwood, Chen Zhao asked, when can my family and I move in? Half a month later. Mr. Chin, you can install the butler system soon. There was no problem of excessive formaldehyde in the United States because the decoration here did not allow the use of any coatings containing formaldehyde, not even a little bit. Therefore, there was no problem of ventilation for a few months after the decoration was completed before people could move in. Chapter 1418. After leaving Moon Beach, Qin Zhao entered the city. The wind and rain had stopped, but the streets were still a mess. The entire city was in chaos. The storm had caused great damage to the city and even the entire west coast. Of course, there were also hundreds of lives. Even before the storm, the Weather Bureau had already sent out warnings many times. But not every family had the means to seek shelter, or perhaps their shelter facilities were too shabby. Even in the downtown area, there were buildings that had been completely destroyed. Many shops in the city were temporarily closed. According to the Weather Bureau, the storm had broken the record for the strongest tropical storm in the past century. The highest speed of the storm was 372 kilometers per hour. Unparalleled destructive power. Even if placed in the entire world, it would be terrifying. Of course, while the entire world was praying for the Americans themselves acted like nothing had happened. Apart from the people in the affected areas, the people in other states didn't care at all. For example, Denver's beer festival was held as scheduled. Dashin beer became famous throughout the United States, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was famous all over the world, because Denver dropped a bombshell at Oktoberfest. The owner of Dashin beer and the brewer of Daydream were the same person. Apart from the African continent, there was basically no one in the other continents who didn't know about daydreaming. Even though a few people didn't admit it, most people admitted that Daydream was the world's most famous beer. Everyone flocked to Daydream, but it was priced at $999,999,999 $999,999, and it was priceless. It wasn't that no one could fork out $1 billion, but the key was that Daydream wasn't something Winnip or Mara Supermarket could sell at will. And then there's the city of Sacramento, which has been hooked up with daydreams. There were too many interests involved in daydreaming. Daydream was something that most people couldn't buy in their lifetime. But Dashin beer was different. Its market price was slightly higher than regular beer, but most people could afford it. Chen Winnip said, "The second batch of beer from your factory has been shipped to our supermarket," the local supermarket in Los Angeles. There are a dozen supermarket chains in California. Yesterday, you sold almost 750,000 cans of beer. The beer factory hasn't resumed production yet," Chen Zhao said helplessly. "Oh, Feilai gave birth. Both mother and daughter are safe." "What? Production stopped? Why? Wait, what did you say? Say it again." "Feilai gave birth," Chen Zhao said. "It's a daughter. 2 days ago at noon. Why did you only tell me after 2 days? Did you do it on purpose?" "Forgot," Chen Zhao said. "I think you did it on purpose. I'll go to L.A. tomorrow." "No, I'll go to L.A. today," Winnip said and hung up. "Damn, that old thing Laurent is coming again?" Chen Zhao's head swelled. No, he couldn't let that old thing come. He called Kareem. "Kareem, I don't care what you, Howard, and Kane do. Get Laurent to the hospital in an hour." Kareem nodded. "Why? Did Mr. Laurent do something again?" "Winnip should come to L.A. in the afternoon. If you can send Laurent to the hospital, you can drink as much purple brew as you want when you come. There's no limit." "That's what you said." "Laurent, you bastard. How many times have I told you to wear a seatbelt even if you're sitting in the back seat? Look at you now. I don't care anymore. I'm going to L.A. How was I supposed to know that Kareem would crash when he's such a good driver?" Laurent's face was gloomy. He was seriously injured in the car accident today. His thigh was pinched, and he couldn't even walk now. He needed surgery. However, when he heard that Winnip was going to L.A., his expression became unhappy. "Why are you going to L.A.? Feilai already gave birth. 2 days ago." What? Feilai gave birth? Is it a boy or a girl? What's the name?" Laurent stood up in excitement, but his agitation pulled at his wound. "Ah, it's a girl, Larissa. Feilai and the child are both healthy," Winnip said. "No, I can't lie here. I have to get out of the hospital. I have to go to L.A. Just stay here." Winnip glared at Laurent. "It's your punishment." "No, I want to see my granddaughters and little Jerlin. I haven't seen them in a long time. And that bastard, he can't take care of 2 kids. Oh, Winnip, bring my granddaughters to Sacramento. That bastard doesn't need to come. I don't want to see him." Winnip rolled her eyes at Laurent. If he dared to say something like that to Chen Zhao, he might just kill him. "If you want little Jerlin and Larissa, tell Chin and Feilai yourself. I can't decide." "Okay, just stay in the hospital. I have to catch a plane." "Don't leave me in the hospital. Don't leave me in the hospital. I have to go to L.A." Winnip did not care about Laurent's cries behind her and strode away. Just like Laurent, she also wanted to see her 2 little granddaughters. "Brother, where are you and my niece now?" "Mom, and I went to Mirror Lake and realized that your house is gone." Yura called Chen Zhao. Her mother was sitting in the driver's seat, although her face was expressionless. However, she was still very anxious. After all, Jerlin was still so young and Feilai was pregnant. Her due date seemed to be in 2 days. If a person cared, they would inevitably think the worst of things. Seeing that Chen Zhao's house had been flattened, Yura's mother couldn't help but worry. Would Feilai and Jerlin be hurt? "Your sister-in-law had a baby," Chen Zhao said. "We're staying at a hotel now." "She already had a baby?" Yura asked. "Which hotel are you staying at?" Yura's mother couldn't stay calm anymore. Was her second grandchild born? But the next moment, Yura's mother calmed down. Give me the phone. Yura's mother grabbed the phone. Qinzhao, it's me. Did Feilai give birth? Is it a boy or a girl? Girl. What's the baby's name? Larissa. Not bad. Solid fortress. Did you name it? Recently, Yura's mother had actually been counting the days with her fingers. She was waiting for Feilai to be born so that she could rush to the scene as soon as possible. That way, she would have the right to name it. Unfortunately, things didn't go as she wished. She was still one step behind. Chapter 1419. Dad, why does little Larissa like to sleep so much? You used to be like this too. Kids love to sleep, but they love to move too. When Larissa could crawl, she wouldn't be able to stop. Kids had low stamina and their stomachs couldn't digest high-calorie food. Plus, every time they drank milk, it was either breast milk or cow's milk. Most of the nutrients were used for growth, so there wasn't much energy for babies to move around. Little Jerlin had gone through the same thing, but her weaning process was rather smooth. When a human grew to a certain stage, their need for food would definitely increase. Little Jerlin was very active. The nutrients provided by dairy products couldn't satisfy the human body's needs anymore. The human body would instinctively choose food with higher protein and more nutrients. Qinzhao didn't understand the mentality of some giant babies who still ate milk as their staple food. Plus, it wouldn't be good for the kids. Qinzhao and Feilai planned to bring little Jerlin and Larissa to stay at a hotel for a few days. After all, if they stayed at the headquarters, it would be inconvenient for Yura's and Feilai's mothers to visit them. Qinzhao was obviously going to stay at Del and Risfar's Harbor Hotel. When Yura and Yura's mother came, they brought a lot of things. They were all baby products, just like when they'd visited little Jerlin before. Actually, many things were the same. Qinzhao and Feilai had already prepared them. But in the eyes of the elders, they could only use what they'd prepared themselves. Others couldn't use what they'd prepared. Mom. Every time Qinzhao and his mother met, they couldn't help but feel distant. His mother nodded. Where's little Larissa? Let me see. She's inside. Feilai's holding her. Grandma, aren't you here to see little Jerlin? Beside Qinzhao, little Jerlin raised her head and looked at her mother with watery eyes. No way. Of course I'm here to see little Jerlin, darling. Mom picked up little Jerlin, kissing and rubbing her. Jerlin, can you stay at Grandma's place for a few days? Mom asked. No, I want to sleep with little Larissa. She'll cry if she doesn't see me. In the past 2 days, whenever Qinzhao and Feilai weren't around, little Jerlin would definitely be talking to little Larissa. Moreover, he talked tirelessly and endlessly. Sometimes she would fall asleep as she talked. When little Larissa grows up, I can teach little Larissa how to walk, swim, and climb trees. Qinzhao, your house was damaged by the typhoon. Yes, I've contacted the construction company and asked them to repair the villa. Then, come live at my place for the next few months. No, Mom. I'm just going to stay in the hotel for a few days. The new house on the beach is almost done. Qinzhao still rejected his mother's invitation. Mom was very disappointed, but this answer was expected. When her mother asked this question, she didn't have much hope. When Mother took little Larissa and Jerlin, who was already in her arms, the 2 little ones were in her arms. That was an unprecedented feeling of happiness. He couldn't bear to part with it and was reluctant to let it go. His mother stayed for 3 or 4 hours. Before she left, she gave them another lesson. It was as if the 2 of them were newbies. In fact, when Jerlin first came to their house, their mother had already taught them a lesson. Elders were all like this. All they wanted was to stay a little longer. Not long after his mother and Yura left, Winnip came. She stayed right next to Qinzhao and Feilai's suite. Winnip was almost crazy with joy. She couldn't bear to put her granddaughter down after picking her up. Only when little Larissa needed milk did she reluctantly return her granddaughter to Feilai. Chen, come out. Let's talk. Qinzhao followed Winnip to the balcony. If your brewery goes all out, how many cans of beer can it produce? Right now, the brewery produces 3 types of beer. I can't calculate how many cans, but it should be around 600,000 liters a day. 600,000 liters of beer was around 1,000,000 cans. Can't you increase the production? Isn't 600,000 liters a day enough? It's not enough. Just the dozen or so stores in California are enough. Now, Mara Supermarket wants to expand across America. There are already 4 new stores outside of California ready to open. You're in contact with Denver, right? You'd better contact Denver about the specific production. Dash and Beer's only channel was Mara Supermarket, so Denver and Winnip were in frequent contact. Winnip had a rough understanding of the brewery's situation. The production problem couldn't be solved in a short time. Ever since the Denver Beer Festival revealed that Dash and Beer and Daydream Beer were brewed by the same person, Dash and Beer became famous. Dash and Beer became famous, and its sales increased by several times. The identity of the Daydream Brewer was just too useful. Over the past 2 days, Mara Supermarket had a large number of customers every morning. After the supermarket opened for business, they swarmed into the supermarket and started fighting for Dash and Beer. At noon, Dash and Beer would be sold out and Mara Supermarket's customer flow would visibly decrease. Winnip saw this, which was why she was so anxious. Dash and Beer could bring a lot of customers to Mara Supermarket. At the same time, it could stabilize the customer flow. If someone was used to going to a supermarket, there was a high chance that they would go there again. Dash and Beer didn't just bring customers. It also brought market share. Chin, if you don't have money, I can invest in the brewery and expand its production. Winnip didn't show any emotion when discussing business with Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao rolled his eyes. First of all, he didn't lack money. Second, the brewery could actually expand production. It was just that they lacked raw materials, so they didn't increase production immediately. Now, they were waiting for the wheat after the autumn harvest. Since Dash and Beer was already famous, they had to choose their raw materials carefully. Therefore, both Chin Zhao and Denver preferred to keep their raw materials under the premise of stable production. Kansas dangle wheat was the main raw material for Dash and Beer. The taste was already set. Unless the price of dangle wheat skyrocketed, they wouldn't change the raw material. Please remember this book's domain name, mobile version. Chapter 1420. Winnip's suggestion was just a casual one. Even she knew that Chen Zhao wouldn't agree to it. In a company with a clear market prospect and strong profitability, as well as abundant liquidity, there was no way they could accept external funds. Dash and Beer's profitability was too strong. It didn't seem like a brand that had just entered the market. One had to know that Dash and Beer was only a medium-sized beer brand company. Its profitability was already comparable to large beer brands. This was what Winnip was most jealous of. After all, Dash and Beer wasn't a listed company. The money would all go into Chin Zhao's pocket. However, the money wasn't limitless. More accurately, production wasn't limitless. If it was another brewery, they could produce limitless. If they didn't have enough production, they could open branches and increase production infinitely. But Dash and Beer couldn't do that. One of the raw materials of Dash and Beer was Mirror Lake's water. Mirror Lake's water mainly came from the waterfall. The waterfall's flow was limited. The waterfall's flow was also the brewery's upper limit. Of course, it was still very difficult to reach the waterfall's upper limit. At least with their current production, they were still very far from the upper limit. Winnip's arrival gave Chin Zhao and Fei Lai a rare moment of leisure. They could spend some alone time. Winnip wanted nothing more than to take care of little Jerlin and Larissa on her own. To her, this was the greatest happiness. Chen Zhao finally didn't have to worry about Fei Lai's health anymore. They could fool around for the whole day. They didn't have to care about anything else and only cared about their own happiness. Just then, Chin Zhao and Fei Lai were interrupted by a phone call. "Hey, Chin Zhao, it's Li Qiong." "Oh, Li Qiong, when are you free?" The next day after the storm, Chen Zhao called Li Qiong. He'd said before that he needed her to install and debug the butler system. Li Qiong also had a job, so she promised Chen Zhao that she would call Chen Zhao after arranging the work. After today, I'll be free. Li Qiong's laughter came from the phone. Did you quit? Chen Zhao vaguely understood what Li Qiong meant. The company doesn't allow me to ask for leave, so I could only quit, Li Qiong said helplessly. Oh, it seems that I caused you to lose your job. I'm really sorry. Are you kidding? You have to pay me $400,000, but my weekly salary is less than $3,000. Even an idiot would know what to choose. Li Qiong chatted casually with Chen Zhao. Right? What did you study in university? I'm philosophy and artificial intelligence, Li Qiong said. Philosophy and artificial intelligence? Isn't there too much of a difference between these two majors? You're not an expert in this field, so you might not know that the current technological development of artificial intelligence is largely based on the human philosophical system. So these two disciplines are far from being as biased as you think. All right, do you have time tomorrow? If I have time tomorrow, I'll ask the security company to send the equipment over. No problem. I'll contact you tomorrow. All right. Chen Zhao had just hung up and was about to continue being intimate with Fei Lai when his phone rang again. Hello, Mr. Andrews. What can I do for you? Mr. Chen, I should congratulate you, Andrews said in a polite tone. Congratulations on the huge success of your company. As the person directly in charge of Chen Zhao's finances, Andrews was like Chen Zhao's steward. He knew all of Chen Zhao's funds like the back of his hand. Of course, he also knew that the popular Dashin beer was Chen Zhao's private property. If the tax bureau asked Andrews to investigate Chen Zhao and Andrews was willing to cooperate, Chen Zhao would definitely lose a lot of money. Of course, Andrews would not do such a thing. He was the most professional financial steward. His first duty was to protect his client's private property. However, Andrews really admired Chen Zhao from the bottom of his heart. To him, Chen Zhao had invested so much money into building a beer brand. It was a thankless effort, at least in the next 3 years. Andrews predicted that Chen Zhao would either lose a lot of money and accept the loan agreement from the bank, or he would not be able to survive. However, no one expected Dashin beer to be so popular. Currently, Chen Zhao had invested around $60 million, but the market value had already reached $1 billion. What kind of concept was this? In just half a year, Dashin beer's return was more than 15 times. Moreover, the market prospects were very good. He believed that Dashin beer's market value would increase further. Of course, the banks wanted to enter the market as soon as possible. The earlier they entered the market, the more profits they would get. Just like Penguin and TB in China, the original shares were the most valuable. Even the banks could not sit still. Who wouldn't want to share in the face of such huge profits? You're not just congratulating me, right? Ha! Mr. Chin, do you intend to accept external investments? It's still too early, Chen Zhao said. Right now, Dashin beer was limited by its production and distribution rate, so it was only valued at a little over $1 billion. Chen Zhao was confident that he could multiply Dashin beer's value. By then, if others wanted to enter the market, it would not be just a few tens of millions of dollars. Chen Zhao also knew that he could not hold all the shares in his hands forever. When necessary, he would still have to give away the shares. Otherwise, if he made too much money, others would definitely be jealous and cause trouble at various stages. It would be really hard to defend against that. However, Chen Zhao could stall for time. Before Dashin beer's value reached his expectations, he could hold onto the shares for now. Andrews thought for a moment and said, Our bank is willing to buy Mr. Chen's shares at a 200% premium. Chen Zhao gasped. Is this Amira's idea? No, it's a decision made by the higher-ups of the bank after discussion. Andrew's meaning was clear. The bank's 200% premium made the bank bear a lot of risk. If Dashin beer's value didn't increase as expected, the bank would lose a lot. But similarly, if the value increased or even exceeded expectations, the bank would make money. Risk and profit definitely existed together. Even if Chen Zhao knew that his Dashin beer could make money, he could not stop the bank from making money. He would wait until the market value was high before letting the bank in. The bank was not stupid. Chapter 14:21. If the bank can agree to one condition, Chen Zhao said, I'll accept the bank buying my shares. Usually, there were two ways to enter the market. One was to buy shares and the other was to inject capital. Dashin beer didn't need a large capital injection. If it did, it wouldn't benefit Chen Zhao at all. Instead, it would dilute his shares. If he bought shares, it would be a real transaction. Money and goods would be exchanged. In the long run, it would be like splitting Chen Zhao's profits and giving part of the money to the bank. However, Chen Zhao could obtain a large amount of profits in a short time. What condition? First, if the bank wants to sell the shares, they have to sell them to me at the market price. At the same time, the bank can't interfere with Dashin beer's production and management. Then only dividends. Andrews asked, when will dividends start? Next year. Dashin beer isn't a public company, after all. Then, how many shares can you transfer? 20%. Can't it be more? Andrews asked. No, I've already given 20% to the company's executives. I can't give away any more. I'll report Mr. Chen's idea to the higher-ups. Okay, I'll wait for your good news. After hanging up, Chen Zhao couldn't be bothered with Fei Lai anymore. He picked up his phone and called Denver. Denver, in the next 30 days, tried to increase the production of the beer factory. It's best if the sales are as high as possible. The bank wants to buy my shares at a 200% premium. I understand, Mr. Chen. Denver's heart jumped. Mr. Chin, I hope to buy 5% as soon as possible. Of course, we're family. If Denver continued to drag it out, his personal price wouldn't be low either. If even the bank was willing to pay a 200% premium, it meant that the bank was very optimistic about Dashin beer's potential. As Dashin beer's sales increased, its valuation would also increase. By then, the price he would pay for the shares would also increase. If possible, he also wanted to buy 20% directly like the bank. However, he didn't have that much cash. Plus, he didn't have the courage to take 5% first. With 5% of the shares in his hands, he wouldn't lose too much even if he lost too much. It was within his acceptable range. If he made a profit, he'd have more capital to buy the shares Chen Zhao promised. Chen Zhao had promised Denver and the bank 40%, but he still had one key point. That was the right of first refusal. Even if someone bought the shares at a price 10 or 100 times higher, Chen Zhao would still have the right of first refusal, and he would buy them at the market price. Unless Chen Zhao didn't want to buy, the shares wouldn't go away. Now, Chen Zhao just had to wait for Dashin beer. Then, he could delay the negotiation with the bank. By then, a 200% premium would be 3 times the market price. A market price of $1 billion is equivalent to a price of $3 billion. For 20% of the shares, the bank would have to pay at least $600 million US. Thinking that he could earn $600 million in one go, Chen Zhao felt like he was floating in the air. However, if he had to pay tax on the $600 million, he would have to pay at least $200 million. By then, Chen Zhao would actually get more than $300 million. Chin of. So he had to chin he. This legal tax avoidance required the help of the bank, and this transaction was originally done with the bank, so the bank would definitely cooperate with him. As the person in charge of Dashin beer, Denver only said a few words in the media, which directly caused the number of customers in Mara's supermarket to increase several times. Although there was only so much beer available, the number of customers skyrocketed. According to Denver, the current production of Big Mountain beer was at most 800,000 liters a day. Those customers who originally planned to buy or had this idea all flocked to the supermarket as if they were afraid that they wouldn't be able to buy it. In fact, Most customers couldn't buy beer. Winnip knocked on the door of the other room they'd booked. She pulled Qin Zhao aside and said a bunch of things. Chen Zhao's attitude was clear. Personal feelings were personal feelings, and business was business. Winnip couldn't do anything. Unless she said something harsh to Qin Zhao, he wouldn't compromise on this. Winnip also wanted the shares of Mountain Beer, but how could Qin Zhao give them to her? He sold it to the bank because the bank gave him a 200% premium. It was sold to Denver because Denver was an executive of Dashin Beer. One could even say that he was the main contributor. What about Winnip? Putting aside personal feelings, could Winnip give him a 200% premium? Usually, as a supplier, they were always restricted by the channel and had to look at the channel's mood. But that was a buyer's market, while Dashin Beer was a seller's market. It wasn't whether he could sell it or not, but whether he was willing to sell it or not. Therefore, from a business perspective, Winnip couldn't threaten Qin Zhao. Instead, she had to worry if Qin Zhao would tear up the contract and start supplying to other supermarkets. Of course, Qin Zhao and Winnip's cooperation was quite pleasant for now. They didn't plan on tearing up the contract. As for the dispute in the past 2 days, it was just a small conflict. It couldn't even be considered a conflict. Actually, Qin Zhao knew that his business talent was limited. He only knew the basic business rules. If the price was right, sell. If not, don't. If there was money, invest. If not, don't. It was a simple business rule. As for the more complicated operations in the financial system, Qin Zhao really didn't understand them, so he wouldn't touch them. For example, funds, stocks, and so on. With Qin Zhao's knowledge, even a few $100 million would be wasted if he played with them. The next day, Qin Zhao brought his family to Mingyue Villa. Qin, why is it called Mingyue Villa? Winnip teased Jerlin as she looked at the buildings on the cliff in the distance. Because I think the name is cool, Qin Zhao said matter-of-factly. Qin Zhao's naming skills were really lacking. Even Larissa's name had been obtained by throwing darts. Qin Zhao's brain was about to explode if he had to name a villa. After thinking about it, he decided to use a more China-style name. Qin Zhao was considering if he should give Mingyue Villa a more iconic name. What kind of logo should he make? Qin Zhao thought about it but couldn't think of anything. Firstly, it couldn't be low-class. Secondly, it could represent Mingyue Villa. Chapter 1422. Qin Zhao had been thinking about what kind of beauty he should get. Dad, what are you thinking about? Jerlin looked at Qin Zhao as if she'd sensed something. Baby, do you think our new home is still lacking something? A moon in the sky. Qin Zhao rolled his eyes. He was already very powerful, but he still didn't have the ability to hang a moon in the sky. Wait, it wasn't completely impossible. Old Turtle's internal alchemy could be considered a moon. However, it seemed too high profile to hang Old Turtle's inner core in the sky. Forget it. I'm just letting my imagination run wild. Dad, did you think of something? Jerlin was too smart. She could guess most of it from Qin Zhao's expression. Winnip, who sat in the front, thought it was a child's babbling. The car stopped. They'd arrived at Mingyue Villa. At this time, the inside and outside of the Mingyue Villa were filled with construction vehicles and workers. When Felwood heard that Qin Zhao was here, he immediately rushed over. Mr. Qin, you're here. Yes. Did the security company send the mainframe over? Yes. They're installing it in the basement, but the people for debugging and installation aren't here yet. Okay, I'll call and ask. Qin Zhao called Li Qiong and asked when she could arrive. Li Qiong was already on her way. She'd left early, but because Mingyue Beach was rather remote, she'd taken the wrong way. Now she was turning back. Half an hour later, Li Qiong finally arrived. When she reached the bottom of the cliff, Li Qiong was also shocked by the majestic manner. It had to be said that Mingyue Villa wasn't very big. At least, Amira's manor was much bigger than Mingyue Villa when she'd attended the party last time. But the key was the shape and location of Mingyue Villa. It gave people a very shocking feeling. After passing through a steep slope of more than 10 degrees, Chen Zhao drove for about 1,000 meters to the top of the cliff and parked the car in an empty space outside the manor. When Li Qiong got out, she saw Chen Zhao and a beautiful woman beside him. "Chen Zhao," Li Qiong greeted. "This is my girlfriend, Fei Lai." "Hello, Ms. Fei Lai." Li Qiong walked up and shook hands with her. "This is my classmate from China. He's also the one who helped me install the butler system. Have you sent the mainframe?" Li Qiong went straight to the point after exchanging pleasantries with the two. "It's already here. The people from that company are installing the mainframe." "Yes, where is the mainframe installed? Take me there." Chen Zhao brought Li Qiong to the basement. The manor's basement had 3 floors, one more than Mirror Lake Villas. One of the floors was used to install the housekeeper's mainframe. At the same time, there were dozens of monitors. Li Qiong communicated with the people from the security company. The people from the security company left after they finished installing the mainframe. They were only responsible for selling and installing the mainframes. As for the debugging of the system, it was up to the customers to find someone to install it. At first, Li Qiong was a little unfamiliar with it. After all, it was her first time coming into contact with this kind of mainframe system. However, she soon got the hang of it and connected to the company's satellite system. At the same time, a satellite surveillance image appeared on the largest monitor in the middle. "Chen Zhao." This is the image of the main control satellite. The other displays are used for monitoring devices. If someone destroys the monitoring devices, the satellite will automatically lock onto the area. If it's at night, can the satellite detect it? The principles of satellite surveillance and video surveillance are different. Satellites are divided into ultra-close range surveillance, heat source surveillance, sensor surveillance, dynamic surveillance, and sound surveillance. Moreover, this company's satellites have 4 types of surveillance at the same time. For example, this is the case. Li Qiong started demonstrating. She said into the microphone, "Turn to the beach surveillance and analyze all suspicious creatures." Then the image on the main monitor started jumping. In the end, a picture of a heat source appeared. There were more than 10 heat sources in the picture. Through analysis, there are 11 people in this area. They all belong to Fellwood Engineering Company. "No bad records," a gentle female voice sounded. Chen Zhao's eyes brightened. This voice was more advanced than the housekeeper system's voice in Mirror Lake Villa. Moreover, through this kind of surveillance, everyone's identity could be analyzed. He had to admit that this function was really powerful. "Turn to sound surveillance," Li Qiong said. Now, other than the image, there was also a lot of noise on the main monitor. It was impossible to distinguish the voices. "Hey, Rod, where are we going tonight?" "Golden Sea Bar. Want to go together?" "Sure." This was the sound that the computer had analyzed, reorganized, and converted into sound. Chen Zhao really didn't expect technology to reach such a level. Of course, it was only for the rich now. Then, Li Qiong started demonstrating other surveillance modes. This company's housekeeper system is like the AI in Iron Man Jarvis. It's very powerful and can even do some simple communication. As long as it's connected to the internet, it can be upgraded every time the company tests the system. It also ensures that the hardware won't be obsolete in the next 5 years. In other words, if the company upgrades the hardware in the next 5 years, they have the responsibility to upgrade your main system too. This was normal. After all, including the installation and debugging, the machine had been bought for nearly $10 million. If it was obsolete in 1 or 2 years, no one would be happy no matter how rich they were. "Chen Zhao, you have pets at home, right?" Yes. There is a pet's characteristic image generated here. Bring your pet to this monitor and let the system record your pet's photo and characteristics. Then, your pet will run to a corner to play. If you can't find it for a while, you can use the butler system to immediately find your pet's location. Moreover, it can distinguish some creatures that are harmful to your pet. Once your pet is threatened, it will immediately alert you. Okay, that's good. Also, there seem to be sharks in this area. You can also use this system to scan and monitor sharks. If a shark appears near your beach, it can alert you immediately. Chun Zhao started to feel that this system was really awesome. It was much better than the housekeeper system. It was really powerful. Is technology so advanced now? Actually, there are many new technologies in the world, which are what we often call black technology. Some of them are quite suitable for rich people like you. Oh, recommend some to me. Chapter 14:23. In fact, the butler system alone was enough to satisfy all of Chun Zhao's family's needs. The other advanced technologies were just icing on the cake. There were no truly epic-making technologies, and there were no revolutionary products. Some of them were already known technologies, and then new ones were being developed. For example, the satellites of the security company were actually government and military satellites modified and put into the civilian market. However, normal companies couldn't get the license to operate satellites. The truly advanced part was the butler system's own intelligence. The pet management system was just a magically modified version of the facial recognition system. Of course, there were more functions that Chun Zhao's family had to experience by themselves after moving in. The most commonly used functions were facial recognition, voice recognition, and fingerprint recognition. The not-so-big butler system had already turned Mingyue Villa into a small sci-fi town. Li Qiong spent a week debugging the butler system for Chun Zhao. When she was done, she received a check for $500,000. Li Qiong was quite pitiful. Chun Zhao didn't express any intention to take things further with her. They weren't the same kind of people after all. However, a check of $500,000 was enough to satisfy her. During this period, Dashin Beer's market value reached $1.3 billion. This was mainly because after the tropical storm, Dashin Beer temporarily stopped production and went on the market again, performing strongly in the market. It sold more than 1 million cans a day and was already the leader in California. There was also news that Dashin Beer would be sold in America. This attracted the attention of investors. More than 20 investors had already inquired about Dashin Beer. They wanted to buy or invest in Dashin Beer. The bank was even more anxious about the negotiation. They bought 20% of the shares at a 200% premium. If they couldn't come to an agreement, Dashin Beer's market value would probably exceed $1.5 billion. In the end, the bank would probably have to pay a much higher price than the initial estimate. By then, the negotiation to buy the shares might end in failure. Therefore, the bank bought 22% of the shares at a market value of $1 for billion plus a 200% premium. That was $924 million for 22% of the shares. Although the bank would help Chun Zhao start the tax avoidance plan, he still had to deduct a portion of the tax in the end. This was unavoidable. In the end, Chun Zhao would get around $800 million. However, this money wouldn't come in all at once. After all, tax avoidance had to be done bit by bit. It couldn't be done all at once. $200 million had already entered his account. This was the first time he had earned such a large sum of money since Nanchi Island. Moreover, in the next half a year, around $800 million would gradually flow into his personal account. Mr. Chin, what do you think of this design? Orford Rabier asked. If I say I want to increase the budget, can you change the plan? Chen Zhao asked. Now that he had money, he couldn't help but want to spend it. Ofer Lobbill was in a difficult position. After all, it had taken more than a month and a design team of dozens of people to complete the design. If it was a small modification, he could accept it. However, overthrowing the design plan was unacceptable to him. How much does Mr. Chin want to increase the budget? Orford Rabier asked. I want a $300 million yacht. Ofer Lurby almost spat out water. Mr. Chen, are you serious? Yes. Chun Zhao nodded. A yacht worth $300 million US? It was 200 million US dollars more than the original budget. A yacht worth 300 million US dollars was enough to make it into the top 10 yachts in the world. Mr. Chin, no problem. We can come up with a new plan, but it'll take a month. Sure, let's do it. Qin Zhao nodded. This man wasn't just rich. He was super rich. Orford Robier had thought that Chen Zhao would only increase the budget by 10 or 20 million. His team of designers had worked for more than a month. From design to labor and time, it would cost a few million. Of course, he wasn't willing to redo it. But now, Chen Zhao actually wanted to increase the budget by 200 million. Then there would be no problem at all. Just the thought of bringing such a business deal to the company made Orf Lurby's blood boil. Yachts were one of the most valuable luxury goods in the world. Within 5 years, they could maintain their value by 90%. Within 20 years, they could maintain their value by 70%. During these 20 years, technology would change, and the depreciation of the currency would far exceed the value of the yacht. This meant that if Chen Zhao designed the yacht with a budget of 300 million, it could still sell for 200 million in 20 years. This was why rich people liked to play with yachts. When they got tired of them, they could sell them and get a new one. Or if they needed emergency funds, they could get them through exclusive yachts. Don't think that all rich people were unreasonable. With this kind of money, they could buy a new one. Actually, not everyone was willing to wait 1 or 2 years, or even 3 or 4. Yacht construction technology had changed. Unless it was a super cruise ship, it would take more than 3 years. If it was just a yacht, it would take no more than 1.5 years, including the design time. This meant that Chen Zhao would get his own yacht by the end of next year. Oh, do your company have any ready-made yachts worth tens of millions? Before the custom-made yacht is completed, I need a replacement. Yes, of course, Orford Robier said excitedly. In just a year, Chen Zhao was actually willing to spend tens of millions to buy a replacement. The world of rich people was indeed unreasonable. Of course, Orford Robier definitely wouldn't make money from this yacht. After all, he had to give Chen Zhao some commission. Mr. Chen, what's your budget? Less than 50 million. Sure, I'll give you the yacht models and quotations that our company has in storage as soon as possible. It won't take more than 3 days. Please wait a moment. Oliver Lobbill sent the news back to the headquarters on the same day. It was a 300 million US dollars deal, and this was the biggest deal Seagate had ever received. No one dared to underestimate this deal. In the past, Qin Zhao didn't really care about yachts because he didn't want to live on the sea even if he spent so much money. However, in the past year, after going out many times, he felt that yachts were a necessity. Chapter 1424. At the beginning of August, the construction of Mingyue Villa was finally completed. In fact, the basic construction had already been completed half a month ago. They could already move in. There were still some workers left, but it wouldn't affect the occupancy of the villa. Nevertheless, Chen Zhao still decided to move in after the construction was completed. After all, there were a lot of shameful things in the house. If the construction workers found something unusual, it was hard to guarantee that the news would leak. Chen Zhao, Fei Lai, Jerlin, and Larissa entered their new home. Behind them was a large group of pets of various sizes. Chen Zhao put Jerlin on the ground. The first thing he did was to hang the river painting in the living room. Actually, Chen Zhao didn't hide from Fei Lai when he went in and out of the painting many times. Fei Lai also knew that this China landscape painting was different. Jerlin carried the kitten Samuel. Samuel had been in the house for more than a year, but it still hadn't grown. It was still the size of a kitten. This was because Samuel's original body was too powerful, so his projection couldn't grow in this world. The others, such as Beelzebub, Raymond, Carrie, King Kong, Amon, Black Ma, and White Ma, had all grown quite a bit. Amon's body had changed the most. If he appeared now, he would definitely look like a monster. Little Jerlin was already screaming, running wildly inside and out of the manor. The villa was 600 square meters. It had 4 floors above ground and 3 underground. There were 2 elevators that led to the Bright Moon Beach at the bottom of the cliff. The total area was around 4,000 square meters. The entire villa was more than 20,000 square meters. Little Larissa arrived at the new home. She squeaked, trying to break free from Feilai's arms. Chun Zhao and Feilai carried little Larissa to the yard. The sea breeze blew in their faces, bringing with it a bit of saltiness. Actually, too much sea breeze wasn't good for one's skin. The sea breeze was corrosive to a certain extent. However, Chun Zhao's family had never worried about their skin. The courtyard was to the left of the villa. It was more than 200 square meters. A crepe myrtle tree shone in the wind, filling the courtyard with purple mist. Crepe myrtle trees had many pests. Very few people planted them because touching the bark occasionally would cause allergies. However, in order to plant a crepe myrtle tree in the courtyard, Qin Zhao had vaccinated and removed the pests. He also buried an angelic crystal under the tree. Qin Zhao knew that Jerlin loved to climb trees, and when little Larissa grew up and hung out with Jerlin every day, there was no guarantee that she wouldn't follow Jerlin's temper. The glass fence went around the entire courtyard, and the outside of the fence was the cliff. The cliff was about 40 meters away from the ground. It was neither too high nor too low. Making it a glass fence was mainly for the sake of the 2 little ones at home. They were likely to drill their heads through it, and it would be dangerous then. Therefore, it was made into a glass guardrail. They couldn't get through even if they wanted to. "Master, may I ask if we can start preparing dinner now?" An underling ran up to them. Due to the destruction of the Mirror Lake Villa, the lesser demons never had the chance to come out. Now that Chun Zhao had finally moved, they finally had a chance to show off their talents. They didn't have to idle around like before. "Go." Chun Zhao nodded. "Move the stuff to the beach. Our family will have a barbecue on the beach tonight." Since he had just moved in, there were still some trivial matters that needed to be dealt with. For example, asking the whole family to record the facial recognition and voice recognition of the butler system. In the evening, the sun set in the west. The surface of the sea was completely illuminated in red. The scene was so dazzling that one couldn't look away. Soon after, the bright moon rose from the sea. This scene was not inferior to the setting sun and the sea before. Aman and Little Nine also appeared in the sea under the night sky. In the sea, the 2 of them could play unscrupulously. If it was Mirror Lake, they wouldn't dare to do anything. They were afraid that the waves would wash into the villa and Chen Zhao would punish them. In the sea, the birds could fly freely in the sky and the fish could swim freely in the sea. There was also a cave under the cliff. It was the new home Qin Zhao had specially prepared for Blackie. There was no need to hide it. Anyway, no one could climb there. "Little 3, little 2, little 1, come out and play," Chen Zhao called at the cave. The 3-headed dog poked its head out and looked at Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao pointed at the sea. "Little 9 is calling you." Woof! The 3-headed dog jumped down from a height of more than 20 meters and landed on the beach. "Let's go down too." Chen Zhao's family went down. A group of underlings were busy on the beach, running up and down. "Feilai, put little Larissa on the sand. You don't have to carry her all the time." Yeah, Mom," little Jerlin said proudly. When Jerlin was little Larissa's age, she could already crawl. Qin Zhao rolled his eyes at Jerlin. This little girl already knew how to boast. "Qin, should we have a moving party this time?" Feilai asked. "Let's wait for Jerlin's birthday," Qin Zhao said. "Her birthday is less than half a month away." When Chen Zhao had brought Jerlin back from San Francisco, it was half September last year. She was already a month old then. Her date of birth was August 17th. However, Chen Zhao hesitated. Should he call Jerlin's other relative, Alex, over? In the end, Alex was Jerlin's aunt too. Jerlin struggled to help Larissa up. She wanted to carry Larissa, but she wasn't strong enough. Unfortunately, She didn't have enough strength, so she could only help him up. Little Larissa, use your legs. You need to use your legs. You're so stupid. In the end, Larissa's legs gave out and she fell onto the sand. Jerlin couldn't stand properly either and fell onto the ground. Roar, roar. Suddenly there was a roar from the sea. Then little Nine came ashore. Chun Zhao saw that one of its heads seemed to be holding something in its mouth. Upon closer inspection, it was actually an adult great white shark more than 6 meters long. Little Nine tossed the shark before Chun Zhao and Fei Lai, looking like he was going to reward them. Chun Zhao's face darkened. Little Nine, eat it yourself. What's the point of giving such a big shark to us? Also, shark meat isn't delicious. Master, shark meat can be eaten after processing, the underling said, running to Chun Zhao. Shark fins are also delicious. I've heard of shark fins, but can shark meat really be eaten? Chun Zhao asked, confused. Chun Zhao knew the general reason. Sharks didn't have a urinary system. Their urine came from their skin, so shark meat was very smelly. It had the smell of urine. Cut off the shark's fins. Little Nine can eat the rest. Don't waste it. Also, eat all the sharks within 10 kilometers of the coastline. After all, they'd settled here. Chun Zhao couldn't let the sharks continue wreaking havoc here. Chapter 1425. Chun Zhao was sitting on the rooftop with Jerlin and Larissa, enjoying the sea breeze and sunlight. Suddenly, an untimely phone call came. Butler, answer the phone, Chun Zhao said lazily. Every corner of the Bright Moon Villa and Bright Moon Beach was equipped with sound detectors. Chun Zhao could talk to the butler system and give orders at any corner of Moon Villa and Moon Beach. Hey, Chin, I heard that Fei Lai's child is already born, right? Robio's voice sounded. Yeah, did you hear about it too? Yes. When can Fei Lai come back to work? Robio exposed his intentions. Robio had no choice. The Angel Beach Coastal Rescue Team really lacked people. The Coastal Rescue Team had long working hours, high work intensity, and average benefits. Furthermore, there were high requirements for the members' physical fitness. Not everyone could join just because they wanted to. Fei Lai's personality and physique were outstanding in the Coastal Rescue Team. She was also kind and responsible for her work. So, Robio wanted to pull Fei Lai back. Fei Lai had been pregnant before, so he had no choice. But now that the child was born, she should come back to work. What he was afraid of really happened. Chun Zhao had a headache. He'd basically told all his friends. Only Robio hadn't been contacted. It wasn't that they weren't close. It was just that Robio had called Fei Lai to work. Robio, you've heard of the Chinese tradition, right? After giving birth, women have to go into confinement. Yeah, I've heard of it, Robio answered. Fei Lai's had a child for a month, right? That should be enough, right? You need to do it for 3 years after giving birth. Chin, don't lie to me, okay? I'm serious, Chun Zhao said seriously. When Fei Lai recovers, I plan on having a second child with her. Actually, Chun Zhao was already satisfied with 2 children. For now, he didn't plan on having a third child, but he would try to fool Robio if he could. Just then, Fei Lai walked up to the rooftop with fruits. Robio, don't listen to Chin, Fei Lai said. I plan on returning after the child is 3 months old. Ah, Chin, Zhao screamed. Fei Lai, are you going to leave me and the children? They are still so young. Do you have the heart to do that? Fei Lai glanced at him. Stop acting pitiful. Fei Lai had been cooped up at home for almost a year. She was about to go moldy. Chen Zhao didn't want Fei Lai to leave. He thought that it would be best if Fei Lai stayed at home every day and lived alone with him. But he couldn't force it. He and Fei Lai weren't married yet. Even if they got married in the future, they couldn't stop Fei Lai from working and doing what she liked. Right, Robio, it's little Jerlin's birthday on the 15th of this month. We're planning to have a birthday party for her. Why don't you come with the Coastal Rescue Team? No problem, but I need to think about what gift to prepare for the little princess. Uncle Robio, little Gerlin is very happy that you're here. There's no need to prepare a special gift. Little Gerlin's words were sweet. Chun Zhao sighed again and again. He stood up, wanting to jump from the roof into the sea below. The other side of the rooftop was the sea. Just as Chun Zhao was about to jump down, Fei Lai suddenly stopped him. Chun Zhao froze. This height wasn't a problem for him. But on second thought, he couldn't make a wrong and dangerous demonstration in front of a child. Chun Zhao smiled awkwardly. Little Gerlin's dimples appeared on her face. Daddy's naughty. Mommy scolded me. Little Gerlin was only 1 year old after her birthday, but her little brain was already smarter than a 4 or 5-year-old child's. Just then, a patch of blood appeared on the surface of the sea. Chun Zhao looked over and saw a shark struggling on the surface. However, Amon and Little Nine weren't nearby. They'd gone to the nearby sea to investigate the terrain. If it wasn't the two of them, then what attacked the shark? Was it another shark? It wouldn't be surprising if sharks killed each other. Sharks like to kill each other. To them, their own kind was also on their list of food. But the shark wasn't small. It should be a tiger shark, more than 5 meters long. Generally speaking, marine creatures that grow to this size, unless it is a highly intelligent creature like a killer whale, other marine creatures will rarely attack them. Even if they were their own kind, they wouldn't attack an adult tiger shark more than 5 meters long. Before Chun Zhao's family had moved in, there had been too many sharks here. Little Nine and Amon couldn't be killed, all of them. These sharks were also very cunning. Once they smelled Little Nine and Amon, they'd flee the area in groups. Once Little Nine and Amon left, they'd return. There seemed to be something here that attracted them. Moreover, most sharks were only 1 or 2 meters long. For Amon and Little Nine, they were too small. Sharks of this size weren't much of a threat to Chun Zhao and Fei Lai, but they were still a threat to Gerlin. Chun Zhao picked up his bracelet. It was a function watch, mainly used to communicate with the butler. After going down to the beach, Chun Zhao lifted the bracelet and said, "Butler, help me lock onto sharks more than 3 meters in the nearby waters." Not every type of shark needed to be cleaned up. However, any shark more than 1 meter long was a threat to Gerlin. So, Chun Zhao would rather kill the wrong one than let it go. 823 meters to the left, 15 meters underwater. There's a 3-meter-long rat shark. Through satellite detection, as long as the water quality was clear and the depth wasn't more than 20 meters, the satellite could see through the water. In the coastal waters of Bright Moon Beach, the water quality was not polluted and belonged to the shallow water region. Most of the water was about 10 meters deep. After entering the water, Chun Zhao swam in the direction the butler had pointed out. Chun Zhao had already sensed the rat shark's location. He could see it as soon as he went down. But just then, a black shadow suddenly entered the range of Chun Zhao's little world. At first, Chun Zhao thought that Amon had returned. But the next moment he realized that it wasn't Amon. The black shadow was huge, but it wasn't at Amon's level. It was only 30 meters long. Soon, Chun Zhao saw it with his naked eyes. It was a shark. A terrifying, two-headed shark. The two-headed shark had come too suddenly. Before Chun Zhao and the rat shark could react, the two-headed shark had bitten the rat shark. Please remember this book's domain name. Mobile version.